They left 3 chairs empty in the front row and thought I would be too broken to notice. But grief does not make you blind. It sharpens you. While everyone else watched me cry, someone else was watching my bank account like it was already theirs. The worst part is that the betrayal did not start after my husband died. It started while he was still alive, and I was the only one fighting for him. My name is Shelby Carney. I am 34 years old. Standing in the center of the funeral home chapel, I felt less like a widow and more like a ghost haunting her own life. The air conditioner hummed with a low, mechanical drone that seemed to vibrate against my bones. The scent of white lilies was suffocating, a cloying sweetness that I knew I would never be able to smell again without feeling the urge to vomit. I stood at the front of the room, my hand resting on the polished mahogany of the first pew. There were 3 chairs right there in the front row. They were distinct from the others, marked with small, elegant placards that read, "Reserved in gold script." They were the most important seats in the room. They were meant for the people who had known me before I was Evan's wife. They were meant for the people who were supposed to catch me when I fell. And they were empty. I checked my watch. It was 10 minutes to 2. The service was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock sharp. I looked toward the heavy double doors at the back of the chapel. They remained closed. Through the small glass panes, I could see the blurred shapes of people milling about in the lobby, but none of them had the familiar silhouette of my mother or the brisk, energetic stride of Tessa, my best friend. I pulled my phone from my clutch for the 5th time in 3 minutes. The screen was black. I tapped it awake. No new messages, no missed calls. The signal bars were full. There was no technical reason for the silence. Mr. Henderson, the funeral director, approached me. He moved with that professional, practiced grace that undertakers perfected, a way of walking that made no sound and took up no space. He clasped his hands in front of him and leaned in slightly. His voice a soft rumble meant only for me. "Mrs. Carney," he said gently, "we are about 10 minutes out. I notice the front row is still vacant. Is the immediate family running a little behind? Do we need to hold the doors for a few minutes?" My stomach dropped. It felt as though the floor had opened up beneath my heels. I looked at those 3 empty chairs again. One for my mother, one for my father, one for Tessa. The 3 pillars of my life. Yes, I lied. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. They are just stuck in traffic. They will be here. Please do not worry. Mr. Henderson nodded, though his eyes lingered on the empty seats for a fraction of a second too long. Of course, we will keep an eye out for them. He drifted away, and I was left alone with the lie. I turned around to face the room, needing to look away from the void in the front row. The chapel was full. It was actually overflowing. Evan had been a supervisor for city transit safety, and the Brotherhood of Public Safety was a real and tangible thing. There were rows and rows of men and women in dress uniforms and dark suits. They were big, solid people who filled the space with a respectful, heavy presence. They were Evan's people. They were here. They had brought casseroles to the house. They had mowed the lawn last week when Evan died. They had pooled money for the flowers that now cascaded over the casket. They sat shoulder to shoulder, a wall of support, their eyes red-rimmed but steady. They were strangers to my childhood, yet they were the only ones holding me up. I looked back at the reserved row. The velvet cushion of the chair meant for my mother looked pristine. I imagined her sitting there. I imagined her holding my hand. I imagined my father on the other side, stoic but present. I imagined Tessa, who had been my maid of honor, who had sworn to be my sister in all but blood, leaning over to whisper that I could get through this. My phone buzzed against my palm. My heart leaped. This was it. They were close. They were parking. They were running through the lobby right now, breathless and apologetic. I lifted the phone. It was a text message from Tessa. It was 12 minutes before the service began. The preview on the screen was short. I unlocked it, my fingers trembling. Something came up. "I can't make it today. Sorry." I stared at the words. Something came up. No explanation, no emergency, no car accident, no illness. just something came up. As if my husband's funeral was a coffee date she had forgotten, or a yoga class she was too tired to attend. This was the woman who had stood beside me at the altar. This was the woman who had borrowed money from me last month because she was short on rent. This was the woman who had promised Evan, to his face, that she would look after me. Something came up. I felt a coldness spread from my chest down to my fingertips. It was a physical sensation, like ice water replacing my blood. Before I could process the betrayal, a notification for a voicemail popped up. It was from my mother. It had been left 2 minutes ago, but I had missed the ring because the phone was on silent. I raised the phone to my ear, pressing it hard against my head as if I could physically force the reality to be different. "Shelby, honey." My mother's voice chirped in my ear. The tone was wrong. It was terrifyingly wrong. It was the tone she used when she called to tell me she had found a sale on linens. It was casual. It was breezy. "Listen, your dad is not feeling too great. His stomach is acting up again." We were on the highway, but we decided to just turn around and head back. We do not want to risk it being something contagious. You know? We will catch up with you later in the week. Love you. The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone slowly. My father had a stomach ache. So they turned around. They were on the highway. They were coming. And then they decided that a stomach ache was a valid reason to leave their daughter alone to bury her husband. I looked at the 3 empty chairs. They were not just furniture anymore. They were gaping wounds. They were accusations. The music shifted. The organist began the opening chords of the hymn Evan had chosen. "Mr." Henderson gave me a nod from the back of the room. It was time. I sat down in the front row, alone. To my left, the 3 empty chairs sat like judges. To my right, the aisle separated me from the rest of the world. I had never felt so small. I folded my hands in my lap and stared straight ahead at the casket. It was polished oak. Evan was inside. The only person who would have been furious on my behalf was inside that box, and he could not say a word. The service blurred. People spoke. The chaplain read scriptures. I stood up and sat down when directed, but my mind was locked on a loop. Something came up. We turned around. Then it was my turn to speak. "Mr." Henderson offered me his hand to guide me up the 3 steps to the podium. I took it, my grip likely tighter than necessary. I walked to the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Evan's boss, a large man with a thick mustache, wiping tears from his eyes. I saw the young rookie Evan had trained, looking pale and shaken. I saw neighbors. I saw the barista from the coffee shop we went to on Sundays. Then my eyes fell to the front row. The gap was impossible to miss. It was a smile with missing teeth. It was glaring. Everyone could see it. Everyone knew. I unfolded the paper I had written the night before. I looked at the words I had prepared about Evan's kindness, his humor, his love for the city, and then I looked at the empty chairs again. I took a breath. The microphone amplified the sound, a shuddering inhale that echoed through the quiet room. "Evan used to tell me that love is not a noun," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It was not the voice of the girl who had been crying in the bathroom an hour ago. It was a new voice, cold, sharp. He told me love is a verb. I continued, "It is an action. It is not about what you say. It is not about what you post on the internet to get sympathy. It is not about sending flowers or writing a card." I gripped the sides of the podium. The wood was cool under my palms. "Love is showing up." I said, "That is it. It is just showing up. When it is hard, when it is inconvenient, when you are tired, when you would rather be anywhere else, you show up, because that is what you do for the people who matter." I paused. I let the silence stretch out. I looked directly at the camera that was live streaming the service for out-of-town relatives. I looked right into the lens, knowing that somewhere, my mother might be watching, knowing that Tessa might be scrolling through the feed. Evan showed up. I said, "He showed up for this city every day for 10 years. He showed up for me every single morning. And look at all of you." I swept my hand toward the packed pews of coworkers and friends. You showed up. You are love. The people who are here, right now, sitting in these seats, you are the definition of family. Because family is not blood. Blood is just biology. Family is presence. I looked down at the front row one last time. And anything less than that, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone caught and carried to the back of the room, is nothing at all. I finished the speech. I do not remember the rest of it. I just remember the feeling of the empty chairs burning into my peripheral vision. After the service, there was the reception. This was the part I had dreaded the most. The handshake line, the condolences. But it was worse than I expected. It was not just grief I saw in their eyes. It was pity. A woman I worked with, a kind nurse named Sarah, hugged me. She pulled back and looked over my shoulder, scanning the room. "Shelby," she whispered, "where are your parents? Is Tessa here?" I wanted to say hello. They could not make it. I said, I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was the humiliation of the abandoned child. It did not matter that I was 34. I felt like the kid whose parents forgot to pick her up from school, standing on the curb while the janitor locked the gates. "Oh," Sarah said. Her face fell. "Oh, Shelby, I am so sorry." She squeezed my hand, and the pity in her touch was heavy. She knew. She realized what it meant that they were not here. It meant I was not worth the drive. It meant my grief was not important enough to disrupt their Tuesday afternoon. Another coworker of Evan's, a man named Mike, shook my hand. "If you need anything." "Shelby," he said, "seriously, I noticed. Well, I noticed you are carrying this heavy load by yourself today. You call us? You hear?" I nodded. "Thank you. Mike?" They all saw it. The empty chairs had been a billboard announcing my isolation. I walked through the rest of the reception in a daze. I drank water that tasted metallic. I accepted hugs that felt like they were holding me together physically because my own structural integrity had failed. By 5 o'clock, the last guest had left. I signed the paperwork with Mr. Henderson. I walked out to the parking lot. My car sat there, a solitary silver sedan. I got in and closed the door. The silence inside the car was sudden and absolute. I drove home. The drive was a blur of gray highway and red taillights. When I turned onto our street, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawns. I pulled into the driveway. Evan's truck was parked on the side of the house, where it had been for 3 months. Seeing it there, gathering dust, was a fresh stab of pain. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was quiet, not the peaceful quiet of a resting home, but the dead quiet of a place where life has stopped. The air smelled stale. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. I walked into the kitchen. I needed a glass of water. I needed to wash the taste of the funeral out of my mouth. I reached for a glass from the cupboard and turned to the sink. That was when I saw it. On the kitchen island, right in the center, sat a folder. I froze. I had left the house at 9 o'clock this morning. The kitchen had been empty. I had wiped down the counters myself. I was meticulous about clutter. There had been nothing on that island except the fruit bowl. I took a slow step forward. The folder was manila, standard office supply. It was thick, stuffed with papers. I had not put it there. Evan was gone. No one else had a key. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a different rhythm than the grief-stricken beat of the afternoon. This was fear. This was instinct. I reached out and touched the folder. It was real. It was not a hallucination born of exhaustion. There was a label on the tab. It was written in black marker, in block letters. It was not my handwriting. It was not Evan's handwriting. It was a single word. Claim. I stared at the word. Claim. What did that mean? An insurance claim? A claim to the house? A claim on me? I looked around the kitchen. The back door was locked. The windows were closed. The house alarm was silent. The green light on the panel glowing steadily. If someone had broken in, they had done it without triggering a single sensor. They had come into my home while I was burying my husband. They had walked into my kitchen, and they had left this. I opened the folder. The first page was not a legal document. It was a printout of a bank ledger. My bank ledger. Specifically, the joint savings account I shared with Evan. The account that held the life insurance payout that had just cleared 2 days ago. I scanned the lines. My breath caught in my throat. There was a transaction highlighted in yellow. It was dated for tomorrow. Transfer request pending. The amount was staggering. It was nearly 80% of the balance. I flipped the page. There was a copy of a signature authorization form. At the bottom, in handwriting that looked terrifyingly like mine, was my signature. But I had never signed this. I flipped another page. It was a printout of an email chain. The sender's name at the top made my knees buckle. It was Tessa. And the recipient? The email address belonged to my father. I gripped the edge of the counter. The grief that had been drowning me all day suddenly evaporated. In its place, something hot and sharp ignited in my chest. They had not missed the funeral because of a stomach ache. They had not missed the funeral because something came up. They had missed the funeral because they were busy. While I was standing at a podium talking about love and loyalty, while I was weeping over a casket, they had been here, or they had been working on this. They were not just absent, they were active. I looked at the folder again. Claim. This was not just theft. This was an eviction notice. They were trying to erase me. I closed the folder. The sound was a soft slap against the granite. I looked out the kitchen window into the dark backyard. The tears were gone. My eyes were dry. Mr. Henderson had asked if any family was coming. I had said yes. I was wrong then. But I knew something else now. My family had not come to the funeral. But they had certainly come to the house. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I did not call my mother to ask how my father was feeling. I did not text Tessa to ask what had come up. Instead, I opened the camera app. I took a picture of the folder. I took a picture of the bank ledger. I took a picture of the email. Then I walked over to the drawer where Evan kept his old police scanner and his lockbox key. I took the key. Evan had told me once, during those long nights when the chemo was keeping him awake, that people show you who they are when they think you are not watching. They thought I was broken. They thought I was a grieving widow who would be too blinded by tears to read the fine print. They thought I was alone. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table where Evan used to sit. I am not alone. I whispered to the empty room. I picked up the folder labeled Claim and held it tight against my chest. If they wanted a war, they had picked the wrong day to start it. Grief cuts you open. Yes, but it also carves out the parts of you that are weak. I walked to the living room and sat down on the couch, the folder on my lap. I was not going to sleep tonight. I had work to do. To understand why that folder on my kitchen counter felt like a knife in my ribs. You have to understand what Evan and I built. You have to understand that before I was a widow holding a piece of evidence, I was just a girl who crashed into a stranger on a Tuesday morning and accidentally found her whole world. It happened 7 years ago. It was not glamorous. There was no slow-motion music or soft lighting. It was 8 o'clock in the morning on a rainy Tuesday in October. I was rushing to the hospital for my shift, holding a cardboard tray with 2 large coffees because I had lost a bet with a coworker. Evan was coming out of the transit station, adjusting his hat. I turned the corner too fast. He stepped out too quickly. Physics took over. I slammed into his chest, which felt like hitting a brick wall, and the coffees exploded. Hot liquid went everywhere. It soaked his pristine blue uniform shirt. It splashed onto his polished black boots. It ruined my scrubs. I was mortified. I started apologizing, talking a mile a minute, grabbing napkins from my pockets and trying to dab at his chest, which only made it worse. I was terrified he was going to yell. I was used to people yelling. My parents yelled when things were not perfect. My patients yelled when they were in pain. But Evan did not yell. He started laughing. It was a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to come from his toes. He caught my hands to stop me from frantically scrubbing his shirt. "Ma'am," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, "I think the coffee is winning. You might want to surrender." I looked up at him. He had kind eyes, That was the first thing I noticed. They were not assessing me. They were not looking for a flaw. They were just warm. "I am so sorry," I stammered. "I will pay for the dry cleaning. I will buy you a new shirt." He shook his head. He told me his name was Evan. He told me he was a supervisor for the City Transit Safety Division. He said that smelling like hazelnut roast was actually an improvement over the usual subway smell. He walked me to the hospital entrance. We stood under the awning while the rain poured down around us like a curtain. We talked for 20 minutes, making me late for the first time in 3 years. When he asked for my number, he did not do it with a pickup line. He just said he wanted to make sure I got home without assaulting any more pedestrians with caffeine. Our first date lasted 6 hours. We sat in a diner booth with cracked red vinyl seats and talked until the waitress started turning off the lights. I learned that he loved old Western movies and hated olives. He learned that I was a phlebotomist who spent her days drawing blood and her nights reading thrillers. It was easy. That was the thing that scared me the most. It was so easy. With my family, everything was a negotiation. Affection was something you earned through performance. With Evan, affection was just there, like gravity. He was steady. That is the best word for him. He was not a flashy man. He drove a truck that was 5 years old and kept it running perfectly. He wore his uniform with pride because he believed in what he did. He kept the trains running. He kept people safe. He was the guy who stopped to help tourists with maps and the guy who de-escalated fights on the platform without ever raising his voice. My life before him had been a series of high-pressure expectations. My parents wanted a daughter who was a doctor, or a lawyer, or married to one. Instead, they got a technician who married a civil servant. When Evan proposed, it was 2 years later. We were in his apartment, making spaghetti. The radio was playing softly in the background. He put down the wooden spoon, turned off the burner, and wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Shelby," he said. I turned around, holding a colander of pasta. He took the colander from me and set it on the counter. Then he took my hands. "I do not have a lot of fancy things," he said. "I do not have a big portfolio and I do not have a summer house. I do not have perfect, but I have you. And if you will have me, I promise I will spend every day making sure you know you are the most important thing in this world." He pulled a ring out of his pocket. It was not a diamond. It was a sapphire, a deep, clear blue. He knew I liked color better than sparkle. I said yes before he could even finish asking the question. My parents did not share my enthusiasm. When I brought Evan to dinner to tell them the news, the temperature in their dining room dropped 10 degrees. My mother looked at the ring and asked if it was a family heirloom, her tone implying that was the only excuse for it not being a diamond. My father poured Evan a drink and immediately started an interrogation that felt more like a tax audit. "So, Evan," my father said, leaning back in his chair, "transit safety. Is there an upward trajectory there? What is the ceiling on that kind of salary?" Evan sat up straighter. "There is plenty of room for growth, sir, but I like being on the ground. I like working with the guys. The benefits are solid. The pension is good. Shelby will be taken care of." My mother laughed. A brittle, tinkling sound. "A pension. That is quaint. But we were hoping Shelby would have a lifestyle that offered a bit more freedom. You know how she likes nice things. I did not like nice things. They liked nice things. I liked peace. But I did not say that. I just reached under the table and squeezed Evan's hand. He squeezed back, his grip firm and reassuring. Tessa was no better. She was supposed to be my best friend. We had known each other since kindergarten. When I told her, she squealed and hugged me, but her eyes were scanning Evan like he was a used car she was considering buying. "He is sweet. Shelby," she said later. When we were looking at wedding dresses, she held up a gown that cost $3,000, knowing it was outside my budget. "But are you sure? I mean, he is a security guard. He is a supervisor." I corrected her, feeling defensive. "And he is the best man I know." I know, she said, waving her hand dismissively. "He is nice. It is just, I always thought you would aim higher. You were always the smart one. I just do not want you to get bored." I did not get bored. I got happy. We bought a house 6 months after the wedding. It was a small ranch-style house on the edge of town. It was a foreclosure, and it looked tired. The paint was peeling. The yard was a jungle of weeds, and the kitchen smelled like the previous owner had fried bacon in there every day for 40 years. My parents came to see it once. They stood in the driveway, looking at the overgrown bushes. "It is a fixer-upper," my father said, the disappointment evident in his voice. "Well, if this is what you can afford, it is what we want," Evan said. He put his arm around my waist. "It has good bones." And it did. We rebuilt that house room by room. We did it ourselves because we could not afford contractors, but also because we wanted to. We spent our weekends covered in drywall dust and paint. We learned how to sand floors. We learned how to tile a backsplash. We ate pizza sitting on the floor of the living room because we did not have furniture yet, laughing until our sides ached about the crooked shelf we had just installed. That house was not just wood and brick, it was us. Every nail, every coat of paint, every planted flower in the garden was a physical manifestation of our partnership. We built a life there. We saved our money. We put 20% of our paychecks into savings every single month. We did not go on lavish vacations. We did not drive luxury cars. We invested in our home and in our future. It was a good life. It was a quiet life. Then the headaches started. It was subtle at first. Evan would rub his temples after a shift. He started buying ibuprofen in the large bottles. He blamed it on the stress of the job, or the bad lighting in the station office. But then came the confusion. One evening, I came home from a 12-hour shift at the clinic. Evan was in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker. He was holding a filter in one hand and a bag of coffee in the other. He looked lost. "Evan?" I asked, putting my bag down. He jumped. He looked at me, and for a second, just a split second, I saw total blankness in his eyes. He did not know who I was. Then it cleared. He blinked, and the recognition rushed back in. "Hey, hon," he said. His voice was shaky. I forgot how to make the coffee." For a minute there, I just could not remember the steps. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked the back of my neck. Evan was the most organized man I knew. He could recite the transit schedules for the entire city from memory. We went to the doctor the next day. The diagnosis did not come gently. It landed on us like a falling safe. Glioblastoma, aggressive, stage 4. We sat in the sterile white office, listening to the oncologist use words that sounded like a death sentence. He talked about resection, radiation, chemotherapy. He talked about timelines. He talked about quality of life versus quantity of life. I held Evan's hand so hard my knuckles turned white. He did not pull away. He listened, nodding, taking notes on a little pad of paper he had brought with him. Even then, he was trying to manage the situation. The months that followed were a blur of terrifying new realities. The treatment was brutal. It drained Evan's energy, and it drained our bank account. The copays were astronomical. The experimental drugs were not fully covered. The modifications to the house to make it accessible cost thousands of dollars. My parents called, but they asked about the insurance coverage more than they asked about Evan's pain levels. Tessa visited, but she looked at Evan's thinning hair and pale skin with a mixture of horror and pity that made me want to scream. One night, about 4 months into the treatment, Evan was lying in the hospital bed we had set up in the living room because he could not climb the stairs anymore. The room was dark, lit only by the street lamp outside. "Shelby," he whispered. I was sitting in the chair next to him, dozing. I woke up instantly. "I am here. Do you need water? Do you need the meds?" "No," he said. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was weak. Nothing like the strong hand that had held mine in the diner 7 years ago, but his eyes were clear. "I am worried," he said. "About what?" I asked, smoothing the hair back from his forehead. "You are fighting hard. Evan, the doctor said the last scan showed—" "I am not worried about the cancer," he interrupted gently. "I am worried about you." "Me?" I forced a smile. "I am fine. I am tough. You know that. I know, he said. But this is expensive, Shelby, and it is exhausting. And I see the way your parents look at the bills on the counter. I see the way Tessa looks at the house. I frowned. What do you mean? He took a breath, as if gathering his strength. They never thought I was good enough for you, he said. They thought I could not provide. And now, I am costing you everything we saved. Stop it, I said, tears stinging my eyes. That is our money. This is our life. I do not care about the money. I know you do not, he said. But they do. And when I am gone— Do not say that, I whispered. When I am gone, he repeated firmly. They are going to swoop in. They are going to tell you that you cannot handle things alone. They are going to try to manage you. They are going to try to take what we built because they think they know better. He pulled me closer. I promised you I would protect you, he said. Remember? In the kitchen? I nodded, tears spilling over. I'm still going to do that, he said. Even if I am not here, I am not going to leave you unprotected. I did not understand what he meant then. I thought he was talking about life insurance. I thought he was talking about memories. I stroked his cheek and told him to rest. I told him we would fight this together. I did not know that while I was fighting the cancer, he was fighting a different war. I did not know that he was using his lucid moments to build a fortress around me. I sat there in the dark, holding his hand, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I thought the tragedy was that I was losing him. I did not realize the tragedy was also who was waiting in the wings to take his place. Now, sitting on my couch with the folder labeled Claim, his words came back to me. I am not going to leave you unprotected. He had seen it coming. He had seen the greed in my father's eyes. He had heard the condescension in Tessa's voice. He had known, better than I did, that the moment he was gone, the sharks would circle. I wiped my face. I looked around the living room we had painted together. I looked at the floor we had sanded. This was not a bad investment. This was not a starter home. This was the empire we had built with our own hands, and I was not going to let them take a single brick. Our home stopped being a home about 6 weeks after the diagnosis. It happened slowly at first, and then all at once, like a tide rushing in and refusing to recede. The sanctuary we had built with sanded floors and carefully chosen paint colors disappeared beneath the sterile, plastic clutter of survival. The living room, where we used to eat pizza on the floor and laugh about our day, was dominated by a hospital bed. It was a hulking mechanical beast that hummed and clicked. The coffee table was no longer a place for magazines or coasters. It was a staging ground. There were rows of orange prescription bottles, each one representing a different chemical battle being fought inside my husband's body. There were boxes of latex gloves, stacks of adult wipes, and a whiteboard I had propped up against the wall to track medication schedules. I lived by that whiteboard. My life shrank down to a series of 4-hour increments. Anti-seizure medication at 8 in the morning, steroids at noon, pain management at 4, anti-nausea at 8, repeat, repeat, repeat. I had to take a leave of absence from the clinic initially. There was simply no way to manage the barrage of appointments. We had oncology consults, radiology sessions, physical therapy assessments, and meetings with social workers who looked at us with tired, sympathetic eyes. When I did go back to work, I could only manage part-time hours. I traded my 12-hour shifts for shorter, erratic blocks of time that barely made a dent in our mounting expenses. Every time I left the house, I felt a physical pull in my chest, a panic that I was abandoning him. I would sit in my car in the hospital parking garage before my shift, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the terror that there was not enough time. There was never enough time. I was losing him by the inch, and I was spending precious hours filling out insurance forms and arguing with billing departments about coverage codes. Evan saw it. He saw the circles under my eyes that concealer could no longer hide. He saw the way my hands shook when I poured his water. "I am so sorry, Shelby," he would say. He said it when I had to help him to the bathroom because his legs were too weak to hold him. He said it when he vomited into a basin I held for him at 3 in the morning. He said it when I had to change the sheets while he sat in the chair, shivering and pale. Stop apologizing. I would tell him, forcing my voice to be bright and steady. You are my husband. This is the deal. Sickness and health. We are just doing the sickness part a little early. He would try to smile. He tried so hard to stay Evan, even when the tumor was pressing on the parts of his brain that controlled language and motor function. His spirit was fighting to stay in the room. He would make jokes about the daytime television shows we watched while he rested. He would wiggle his eyebrows at me when I bent over to adjust his pillows, trying to make me laugh through the nausea. You know, he said one afternoon, his voice rasping from the dry air. I always wanted breakfast in bed. I just did not think the menu would be 5 pills and a protein shake. I laughed because if I did not laugh, I would scream. I kissed his forehead, which always felt too hot, and told him he was a high-maintenance customer. In the beginning, the world outside our windows seemed to want to help, or at least, they wanted to be seen helping. Tessa was a whirlwind of activity in those first few weeks. She showed up almost every day. She brought casseroles that were heavy with cheese and cream. Things Evan could not stomach, but that looked good in a container. She brought wine for me. She brought magazines. She also brought her phone. Every time she came over, she would take a picture. She would take a photo of the flowers she brought sitting on the counter. She would take a selfie with me, looking somber and brave. She would post them immediately. I would get notifications on my phone while she was still sitting on my couch. Checking in on my warrior bestie. So proud of her strength. Please keep Evan in your prayers. Cancer sucks. Best friends. The comments would roll in. People would tell her she was such a good friend. They would call her an angel. She would read the comments out loud to me, as if they were a balm for my pain. Look, Shelby, she would say, Sarah from high school sends her love. And look, your cousin liked it. Everyone is rooting for you. It felt like a performance, but I was too exhausted to critique the audience. I was just grateful she was there. I needed the noise. I needed another human being in the house to break up the terrifying quiet of the sick room. My parents were different. They did not perform. They retreated. They came to visit exactly once in the first month. They stood in the living room, keeping their coats on, as if taking them off would mean committing to staying. My mother looked at the hospital bed with a mixture of horror and distaste. She did not touch Evan. She stood 3 feet away, clutching her purse, and asked him how he was feeling in a voice that was too loud, the way one speaks to a child or a foreigner. My father walked around the room, inspecting things. He looked at the wheelchair we had rented. He looked at the oxygen concentrator that hummed in the corner. These machines, he said, tapping the oxygen tank. Is this covered? Or is this out of pocket? It is rental. Dad, I said, adjusting Evan's blanket. Most of it is covered. Some of it is not. He nodded, frowning. You need to watch those invoices. Shelby, they will overcharge you if you are not careful. Make sure you are itemizing everything. He did not ask if I was sleeping. He did not ask if I was eating. He asked about the accounting. When they left after 45 minutes, claiming they wanted to beat the traffic, the silence they left behind was heavy. I looked at Evan. He was pretending to be asleep, his eyes closed, but I saw a single tear track sliding down his temple into the pillow. He knew. He knew they were repulsed by his weakness. He knew they saw him as a liability, a sinking ship that they did not want to be aboard. As the weeks dragged into months, the adrenaline faded, and the cold reality of economics set in. The American healthcare system is a machine designed to extract every penny you have before it offers you mercy. I was paying for parking at the cancer center 3 times a week. I was paying copays for every specialist. I was paying for the expensive liquid nutrition Evan needed because he could not swallow solid food anymore. I was paying for the better brand of adult briefs because the cheap ones chafed his skin. Our savings, the money we had put away for a nursery or a vacation, began to evaporate. I watched the balance on the banking app tick down, hundreds of dollars at a time. It was a slow-motion car crash. I stopped buying coffee. I stopped buying meat. I canceled our streaming services. I turned the heat down to 60 degrees and wore sweaters inside, but it was not enough. One afternoon, I was at the pharmacy picking up a new anti-seizure medication. The pharmacist ran my card. Declined. I stared at the little machine. My face burned. There were 3 people in line behind me. Try it again. Please, I whispered. She ran it again. Declined. I stepped out of line, my hands shaking. I checked my balance. We had $70. The medication cost $140. I walked out to the parking lot and sat in my car. I did not cry. I was past crying. I was in a state of cold panic. If Evan did not get this medication, he would seize, if he seized. We would have to go to the emergency room. If we went to the emergency room, the bill would be thousands. I called Tessa. I did not want to. Every cell in my body revolted against it. But I had no choice. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said, I was just thinking about you. Tessa, I said, my voice tight. I am at the pharmacy. There is a problem with the bank. The transfer has not gone through yet. I need to borrow some money, just for a few days. There was a pause, a silence that stretched just a second too long. Oh, Shelby, of course, she said, her voice shifting into that helper tone she used for her audience. How much do you need? I need $140 for the meds, I said. And the mortgage is due on Friday. I am short. How much total? She asked. $2,800, I said. The number felt huge. It felt like a stone in my throat. I will pay you back as soon as the disability check clears. I promise. Don't be silly, she said. I will transfer it right now. Do not worry about paying it back immediately. Just focus on Evan. We are family, right? That is what family does. I felt a rush of gratitude so intense it made me dizzy. Thank you, Tessa. Thank you so much. You have no idea. I saw the notification pop up on my phone minutes later. $2,800. It was a lifeline, but that lifeline came with a shift in the atmosphere. The money changed things. It was unspoken, but it was there. When Tessa came over the next time, she walked in without knocking. She went to the fridge and opened it, commenting that we were out of milk. She sat in Evan's chair, the good chair, while I sat on the floor, and then she stopped coming. It was not sudden. It was a gradual erosion. First, the daily visits became every other day, then twice a week. Then the text started. Stuck at work late. Can't make it tonight. So sorry. I think I'm coming down with something. Don't want to get Evan sick. I will come tomorrow. Tomorrow. That word became a ghost. I would tell Evan, Tessa is coming tomorrow. He would nod. His eyes closed. But tomorrow would come, and my phone would buzz with another excuse. Her car broke down. Her mother needed her. She had a migraine. I sat by the window, watching the street, waiting for a car that never pulled into the driveway. The isolation began to wrap around the house like a thick fog. My parents were even worse. They stopped pretending to care about Evan's health entirely. Their calls, which used to be weekly, became sporadic, and the content of the calls shifted. They stopped asking. How is Evan today? They started asking. Have you located the deed to the house? I remember one call specifically. It was a Tuesday. I was sitting on the kitchen floor, mixing Evan's formula. Shelby, my mother said, your father and I were talking. We are just worried about your long-term stability, with the market the way it is. Have you checked the life insurance policy recently? Are you sure the beneficiaries are up to date? Mom, I said, staring at the powder dissolving in the water. Evan is still here. He is in the next room. I know, she said hastily. We are just being practical. Dear, someone has to think about the future. You are too emotional right now to see clearly. We just want to make sure you are not left with a mess. They were burying him while he was still breathing. They were mentally probating his estate while I was still trying to keep his heart beating. I hung up the phone. I walked into the living room. Evan was awake. He was looking at the ceiling. The room was dark, lit only by the blinking green light of the oxygen machine. Who was that? He whispered. My mom. I said. I sat down on the edge of the mattress. Did she ask about me? He asked. I hesitated. I could not lie to him. Not about this. No, I said softly. She asked about the insurance. Evan closed his eyes. He let out a long, slow breath. I am sorry. Shelby, he said. Stop, I said. Do not apologize. I am sorry you are doing this alone, he said. I looked around the room. I looked at the 3 empty chairs I had set up near the window for visitors who never came. I looked at the silent phone. I looked at the pile of bills on the table. He was right. We were alone. The world had moved on. The friends who had posted support on Facebook were busy with their vacations and their dinners. My parents were busy protecting their assets. Tessa was busy avoiding the reality of what she had lent money to. It was just me and him. I lay down next to him on the narrow hospital bed, careful not to pull the tubes. I put my head on his chest. I could hear his heart beating. It was a steady, rhythmic drum in the silence of the abandoned house. We are not alone. I lied. Closing my eyes, we have each other. But as I lay there, listening to the hum of the machines, I knew the truth. We were an island, and the water was rising, and the people who were supposed to be our boats were standing on the shore, watching to see if we would drown. It started with a dead battery. It is strange how the most devastating revelations in life often hinge on the most mundane inconveniences. If I had remembered to plug my phone into the charger on the kitchen counter, or if the cord had not been frayed from months of overuse, I might have gone on trusting them for weeks longer. I might have signed the papers. I might have let them walk me right off the cliff they were building at the edge of my life, but my phone was dead. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Gray and leaking rain against the windows. I needed to call the specialty pharmacy to authorize the delivery of Evan's new morphine prescription. The automated system required a callback number, and since mine was a black brick of glass and plastic, I turned to Tessa. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes. It was one of her good days, or so I thought. She had come over unprompted, humming a tune, rolling up her sleeves to scrub the pans that had been soaking for 2 days. Tessa, I said, leaning against the doorframe. My phone died. Can I borrow yours for a second? I need to call the pharmacy before they close. Of course. Babe, she said, wiping her soapy hands on a towel. She unlocked it and handed it to me. Just do not judge my search history. I have been looking up symptoms for a weird rash. She laughed, a bright, bubbly sound that felt jarring in the quiet house. I took the phone and walked into the living room to get away from the noise of the water. I dialed the number. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the hold music, staring blankly at the rain sliding down the glass. The music stopped. I expected a human voice. Instead, the phone vibrated against my cheek. It was not the pharmacy picking up. It was a text message coming in. I pulled the phone away from my ear to check the screen, thinking I would just swipe it away. The banner notification was at the top. The sender's name was saved as Mrs. C. That was my mother. The preview text was short. It was one sentence. Did you get her to sign anything yet? I stared at the words. The hold music started up again in my ear. A tinny, cheerful saxophone melody. But the world around me seemed to stop. Did you get her to sign anything yet? My thumb hovered over the screen. My brain, exhausted from months of sleep deprivation and grief, tried to rearrange the logic. Maybe they were talking about a birthday card for a relative. Maybe they were talking about a petition. Maybe my mother was asking Tessa if she had gotten me to sign a get well card for someone else. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach where my intuition had been buried under layers of fatigue, I knew that was not it. Who was her? I was her. And what did I need to sign? I felt a sudden wave of nausea. I wanted to click the message. I wanted to open the thread and scroll back. I wanted to see what came before, but then I heard the water stop in the kitchen. I heard Tessa's footsteps. "Shelby?" she called out. "Did you get through?" I panicked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I swiped the notification away just as Tessa walked into the room. "No," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy. "Yes, I am on hold." I turned my back to her, pretending to focus on the call. My hand was gripping her phone so hard I thought the screen might crack. "Okay, well, I am going to step out on the porch for a smoke," she said. "Just holler if you need anything." She walked past me. I watched her go. She looked so normal. She was wearing a pair of yoga pants and one of Evan's old hoodies she had borrowed weeks ago and never returned. She looked like my best friend, but the text burned in my mind. When I finally finished the call, I placed the phone on the coffee table. I did not unlock it again. I was too afraid of what I might find, and I was too afraid of being caught looking. I spent the next hour trying to rationalize it away. I told myself I was paranoid. The doctor had warned me about caregiver burnout. He said it could cause irritability, confusion, and suspicion. "You are just tired." "Shelby," I told myself as I adjusted Evan's pillows, "you are looking for villains because you are angry at the cancer." But the seed had been planted, and once suspicion takes root, it feeds on everything. 2 days later, I was in the hallway, folding laundry. The window in the hallway faced the front porch. The screen was open to let in the cool breeze. Tessa was out there again. She was on the phone. I could not hear who she was talking to, but I could hear her voice clearly. It was low, that hushed tone people use when they are sharing secrets or gossip. "She is a mess. Honestly," Tessa said. I froze. I stood there, clutching one of Evan's t-shirts, pressing myself against the wall so I would not be seen. I know, she continued. "But she is not thinking clearly. She is too attached. She thinks she can keep doing this forever. It is delusional." Pause. "No, I have not brought it up today. The timing has to be right. We have to wait until she crashes. She is running on fumes. Once she crashes, she will agree to anything just to make it stop." I stopped breathing. Too attached? I was his wife. I was his caregiver. How could I be too attached to the man I had promised to love until death? And then she said the word that had been haunting me for weeks, though I had not realized it until now. "We just need to make sure we are positioned for after." Tessa said, "After." It was not if he dies. It was not when he passes. It was simply after, a point in time on a calendar, a schedule. They were not talking about a tragedy. They were talking about a logistical event. They were planning the post-Evan landscape while I was still trying to keep his lungs filling with air. I backed away from the window, my legs trembling. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet so no one could hear me hyperventilate. After, the word sounded like a guillotine blade dropping. That night, I could not sleep. Evan was restless, murmuring in his sleep, his dreams likely clouded by the medication. I sat in the armchair next to his bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. "Did you get her to sign anything yet?" "We have to wait until she crashes." I needed to know. I needed to know if I was crazy or if I was being hunted. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. I logged into our online banking portal. I had not looked at the detailed transaction history in weeks. I usually just checked the balance, saw that it was terrifyingly low, and logged out before I could panic. But tonight, I needed to see the details. I scrolled back to the date Tessa had loaned me the money. There it was, a transfer deposit, $2,800. I remembered the relief I had felt that day. I remembered crying in the car. I remembered thanking her. I scrolled down. The next day, October 14th, there was a withdrawal, a TM withdrawal. The amount? $2,800. I stared at the screen. I blinked, sure that my tired eyes were deceiving me. I cleaned my glasses and looked again. It was there, black and white. Someone had gone to an ATM and withdrawn the exact amount Tessa had transferred, less than 24 hours after it arrived. I sat back, my mind racing. I had not done that. I had not left the house that day. I remembered that day clearly because Evan had a bad reaction to the new chemo meds, and I had spent 12 hours holding a basin for him. I had not gone to an ATM. I had not authorized a transfer. I looked at the transaction details. It was a physical withdrawal from a machine 3 blocks from our house, 3 blocks away, the machine at the gas station. I tried to construct a scenario where this made sense. Had I paid a bill in cash? No. Had I paid a contractor? No. We had stopped doing house repairs months ago. The money had come in, and the money had gone out. It was a ghost transaction. But the balance on the screen told the truth. We were missing $2,800. My mind went to the debit card. Where was it? I usually kept it in my wallet, but my wallet had been sitting on the kitchen counter for weeks. I rarely went anywhere. And who had access to the kitchen counter? Tessa. She had gone to the store for me that day. I remembered now. She had offered to pick up groceries because I could not leave Evan. I had told her to take my card. Just buy what we need. I had said, the PIN is 2410. I had given her the PIN. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. She had transferred the money to me, played the hero, and then used my own card to take it back the next day. Why? To make me feel indebted, to make me feel like she had saved me, to create a leverage that did not actually exist. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely latch the lid. I needed more proof. One transaction could be a mistake. Maybe I had forgotten something. Maybe I was losing my mind. I remembered the envelope. 3 weeks ago, Evan's old partner from the force, a man named Miller, had stopped by. He had been awkward, standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands. He had handed me a white envelope. The guys passed the hat around. He had mumbled, for groceries, or whatever, just some cash to help out. I had not counted it, but it felt thick. I had put it in the top drawer of the antique desk in the corner of the living room, intending to use it when the next utility bill came. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through deep water. I walked over to the desk. I opened the drawer. There were pens. There was a stack of unopened mail. There was a stapler. The envelope was gone. I pulled the drawer all the way out. I checked the back. I checked underneath the papers. Nothing. I checked the other drawers. Nothing. I stood in the middle of the living room, the silence pressing in on me. The envelope was gone. The bank account had been drained of the loan. The text message about signatures. I was not crazy. I was being robbed. And not by a stranger breaking a window. I was being robbed by the person holding my hand. The next morning, Tessa came over at 9 o'clock. She brought bagels. She was cheerful, loud, filling the space with her energy. I sat at the kitchen table, watching her unpack the bag. Tessa, I said. I tried to keep my voice casual, but it sounded brittle to my own ears. Yeah. Hun? She asked, popping a piece of cream cheese into her mouth. I am looking for that envelope Miller dropped off, the cash from the guys. I thought I put it in the desk, but I cannot find it. Did you move it? She did not flinch. She did not pause. She turned to me with a look of pure, unadulterated concern. Oh, Shelby, she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. You spent that last week, remember? I stared at her. I did? Yes. Sweetie, you gave it to the medical supply guy. For the oxygen tank deposit. Do you not remember? I frowned. No. I paid the deposit with a check. I have the carbon copy. Tessa sighed. She walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, like a yoke. Honey, she said softly, you wrote a check for the first month's rental. You paid the deposit in cash. I was standing right here. You counted it out. She looked me right in the eyes. Her gaze was steady. There was no guilt there, only a terrifying pity. You are exhausted. Shelby, this is what happens. It is called caregiver brain fog. My aunt had it when she was looking after my uncle. You start forgetting things. You start losing time. It is totally normal. I looked at her. I looked at the face I had known since we were 5 years old. I knew I had not paid cash. I knew the medical supply company did not even accept cash for deposits. They required a card on file. She was lying. She was lying to my face. And she was using my exhaustion as a weapon to make me doubt my own reality. You are probably right, I said. I looked down at the table. I must have forgotten. Good girl, she said. giving my shoulder a squeeze. Do not worry about the small stuff. Let me handle the thinking for a while. You just focus on Evan. She turned back to the counter to slice the bagels. I watched her back. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. She thought she had won. She thought I was broken enough to believe her. She thought I was a confused, grieving wife who would sign whatever piece of paper they put in front of her just to make the noise stop. But she had made a mistake. She had mentioned the oxygen tank deposit. I stood up. I'm going to go check on Evan, I said. I walked into the living room. I sat down in the chair next to the bed. I reached under the mattress, where I had hidden a small spiral-bound notebook earlier that morning. I opened it to the first page. I picked up a pen. My hand was not shaking anymore. October 24th. I wrote, Tessa claims I paid cash for oxygen deposit. Lie. Company policy is card only. Cash envelope missing. Approx $300. October 14th. I wrote below it, withdrawal of $2,800. Same day as loan. Tessa had card access. Text message. I wrote, Did you get her to sign anything yet? Sender. Mom. I looked at Evan. He was awake, his eyes watching me. What are you writing? He whispered. I looked at him. I could not tell him the truth. It would break his heart. He loved Tessa. He trusted my parents. He thought I was surrounded by support. I could not let his last days be poisoned by the knowledge that the wolves were already in the room. Just a grocery list. I lied. Just keeping track of things. He smiled weakly. You were always organized. Yes, I said. I closed the notebook and slid it back under the mattress. I am getting organized. I was done crying. I was done rationalizing. I was done hoping that there was a misunderstanding. There is a specific kind of clarity that comes when you realize you are the only thing standing between the person you love and the people trying to pick his bones clean. It is a cold, sharp clarity. They wanted me to sign something. They wanted to position themselves for after. They wanted to confuse me until I handed over the keys to the kingdom. I sat back in the chair and took Evan's hand. I was not going to crash. I was not going to fade. I was going to take notes, and when they finally made their move, I was going to be ready. The escalation began with a simple envelope. It was a Thursday. I walked out to the mailbox at the end of the driveway, my slippers crunching on the gravel. The air was cold, the kind of damp chill that settles into your bones and stays there. I grabbed the stack of mail, mostly bills and flyers for funeral homes, which felt like a cruel joke, and walked back inside. I sorted through the pile on the kitchen counter. There was a letter from the Disability Benefits Office. It was a standard white envelope with a window for the address, but something was wrong with it. I held it up to the light. The flap on the back was not smooth. It was wrinkled. The paper slightly torn near the corner. It looked like someone had steamed it open, or pried it up with a letter opener, and then tried to reseal it with a glue stick that had not quite held. The seal was crooked, sitting just a fraction of an inch higher than the original gum line. I stared at it. I knew I had not opened it. I had just taken it out of the box. I slit the top with a knife and pulled out the letter. It was a notification of benefits adjustment, but the check that was supposed to be attached to the bottom perforation was gone. The paper ended in a jagged tear. My heart started to thud a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the phone and called the benefits office. I navigated the automated menu, pressing 0 until a human finally answered. I am calling about a check, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It was supposed to be attached to my statement. It is missing. Let me check that for you. Ma'am, the operator said. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Yes, that check was issued on the 1st. It shows as delivered. In fact, our system shows it was cashed yesterday via mobile deposit. Cashed? I whispered. Yes, ma'am. I hung up. I did not ask who cashed it. I knew I could not get that information without a subpoena, but I knew I had not cashed it. There was only one other person who had a key to my mailbox. Tessa. She had asked for a spare key 2 months ago, claiming she wanted to be able to bring in the mail for me if I was at the hospital with Evan. I sat down on the stool. $1,200. Gone, just like the cash from the envelope. just like the withdrawal from the ATM. But this was different. This was federal mail. This was a felony. Before I could process the magnitude of it, the front door opened. Tessa walked in. She was wearing a bright yellow raincoat. She shook it off, spraying droplets of water onto the floor I had just mopped. "Hey," she chirped. "It is nasty out there. How is our patient?" She walked into the kitchen, right past me, and opened the fridge. She grabbed a soda. I watched her. I looked at her hands, the hands that had held mine at my wedding, the hands that I now suspected had pried open a government envelope. "Tessa," I said. "Yeah?" She popped the tab on the can. "I was just looking at the insurance paperwork." I lied. I turned the envelope over so she could not see the torn flap. "I am trying to figure out the beneficiary designation. Do you remember where Evan keeps the policy number?" She froze. The soda can paused halfway to her lips. Her eyes lit up. It was subtle. But I saw it. It was a flicker of hunger. "Oh, I think it is in the filing cabinet," she said, her voice dropping to a helpful, serious register. "Do you need help finding it? You really should make sure that is updated. Shelby, if the beneficiary is not clear, it can get tied up in probate for months. You do not want that." She put the soda down and leaned against the counter. "Do you have the login for the online portal?" she asked. "No." I said, "I think he wrote it down somewhere." "You should find that," she said urgently. "Actually, if you find it, give it to me. I can log in and check the status for you. You have enough on your plate. I can make sure the payout structure is set up correctly." She reached out and touched my arm. "I just want to make sure you are taken care of," she said. "When the time comes." There it was again. The time. The after. She was not asking about Evan's pain meds. She was not asking if I had eaten. She was asking for the keys to the vault. I pulled my arm away, pretending to reach for a napkin. "I will look for it later," I said. That afternoon, my parents arrived. They had called an hour before to say they were dropping off a care package. When they walked in, the energy in the house shifted immediately. It became suffocating. My mother was wearing a trench coat she did not take off. My father was wearing a suit, as if he had come from a business meeting. "We brought you some things," my mother said, placing a cardboard box on the table. "Canned soup, crackers, some vitamins. You look pale." "Shelby, thank you," I said. She did not go to see Evan. She stayed in the living room. I watched her out of the corner of my eye as I unpacked the box. She had her phone out. She was walking slowly around the room. She held the phone up, angling it. Click. She took a picture of the antique Tiffany lamp on the side table. She took 2 steps. Click. She took a picture of the hardwood floors we had restored by hand. Click. She took a picture of the oil painting over the fireplace. "Mom?" I asked. "What are you doing?" She jumped slightly, then smiled. A tight grimace of a smile. "Just taking some photos for memories," she said. Of the house, before everything changes." "What is going to change?" I asked. My father stepped forward. He cleared his throat. "Shelby, listen," he said. He clasped his hands behind his back. "Your mother and I have been talking. This situation, it is not sustainable. You are drowning here. We can see it. I am fine." I said, though I was shaking. "You are not fine," he said firmly. "You are exhausted. And frankly, keeping Evan here, in this condition, it is not fair to him. He needs professional care." He paused, waiting for me to agree. When I did not, he continued, "We found a facility." He said, "It is very nice, state-run, but decent. We think you should move him there. Let the professionals handle him." "And then?" I asked. My voice was very quiet. "Then you come stay with us," my mother said, lowering her phone. "You can sell this place. The market is high right now. Shelby, if you sell now, you can get a good price. You can pay off the medical debts, put a little away, and start fresh. Start fresh." They were not talking about my life. They were talking about liquidation. They wanted Evan out of the house so they could stage it. They wanted him in a state-run facility so they could stop worrying about their inheritance being drained by his care. I looked at the box of soup they had brought. It was the generic brand. I reached into the bottom of the box to flatten the flaps. My fingers brushed against a small, stiff piece of cardstock. I pulled it out. It was a business card. Jameson and Sons, Wealth Management and Estate Planning. It was not my card. It was not Evan's card. I looked at my father. This fell out of the box, I said, holding it up. He did not look embarrassed. He looked impatient. Mr. Jameson is a friend of mine. He said, I spoke to him about your situation. He can help you manage the assets once the house is sold. He can help you invest the proceeds. The proceeds. They were calling my husband's life insurance and our home proceeds. I felt a wave of dizziness. They had not come to comfort me. They had come to close the deal. I laid the card on the table. Evan is not going to a facility, I said, and I am not selling the house. Shelby, be reasonable, my mother snapped. You cannot afford this. I can afford it, I said. I did not tell them about the missing money. I did not tell them I knew about the theft. I just stood my ground. They left 20 minutes later, angry and cold. My mother told me I was being selfish. My father told me I was making a financial error that would ruin me. When the door closed behind them, I felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I went back to the kitchen. Tessa was still there, scrolling on her phone. She had listened to the whole thing. They have a point. Shelby, she said without looking up, a facility might be better. I looked at her. The anger that had been simmering in my gut for days finally boiled over, not into a scream, but into a direct, hard question. Tessa, I said. She looked up. Yeah? Did you see a check from the benefits office? I asked. It was supposed to come yesterday. She did not blink. A check? No. Why would I see it? Because you have the key to the mailbox, I said, and because the office said it was delivered, and because the envelope I found today had been opened and glued back shut. Her face changed. The helpful best friend mask slipped, revealing something ugly and sharp underneath. Are you accusing me? She asked. Her voice rose an octave. I am asking you. I said, wow, she said. She stood up, slamming her hands onto the counter. Wow. Shelby, after all I have done, after I have been here every day, after I scrubbed your toilet, after I loaned you money when you were desperate, she threw the word loan in my face like a weapon. You are accusing me of stealing mail? She shouted. You are paranoid. Your parents are right. You are losing your grip. She grabbed her purse. I cannot believe you, she said. I am leaving. Do not call me until you are ready to apologize. She stormed out. The house shook when she slammed the door. I stood in the kitchen, trembling. For a second, I doubted myself. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe the mail was just damaged. Maybe the bank made a mistake. Her outrage had felt so real. I walked into the bedroom. Evan was awake. He was propped up on his pillows. His face was gray, his eyes sunken, but he was looking at the door where Tessa had just exited. He lifted his hand. It was trembling, but he beckoned me over. I went to him. I sat on the edge of the bed. I was fighting back tears. I drove her away. I whispered, if I am wrong, Evan, I just lost the only help I had. Evan looked at me. His speech had been bad lately, slurring and slow, but tonight, he focused every ounce of energy he had left. He reached out and took my hand. His skin was paper thin. Shelby, he said. I looked at him. If something feels off, he said, saying each word clearly, distinctly. It is. I stared at him. You are not crazy, he said. He tapped his chest. I hear them, he whispered. I hear them when they think I'm asleep. Tears spilled down my cheeks. He knew. He had been lying there, trapped in his body, listening to them plot the dismantling of his life. Check the laptop, he said. The laptop? Mine, he rasped. Look behind. The research. He closed his eyes, exhausted by the effort. I waited until his breathing evened out. Then I stood up and went to the desk in the corner where his old laptop sat collecting dust. I opened it. It was password protected. But I knew the code. It was our anniversary. The screen flickered to life. There were a dozen tabs open. Clinical trials, hospice ratings, symptom management. But down at the bottom of the screen, minimized in the tray, was an email window. I clicked it. It was a draft. It had never been sent. The subject line was, "Inquiry regarding asset protection and power of attorney fraud." I felt a chill run down my spine. I read the body of the email. To Harrison Legal Group. Dear Mr. Harrison, my name is Evan Carney. I am currently terminal. I have reason to believe that individuals close to my family are attempting to manipulate my wife and access our financial assets prior to my death. I need to know how to lock down our accounts so that only she can access them. I have noticed missing cash. I have heard conversations regarding the sale of my home against my wishes. Please help me protect her. I do not have much time. The email ended there. He had never hit send. Maybe he had gotten too sick. Maybe he had passed out. But he had seen it. I looked at the date on the draft. It was 3 weeks ago. He had been protecting me, even while he was dying. He was trying to shield me from the vultures. I looked back at the bed. He was asleep now. The gaslighting shattered. The doubt evaporated. I was not paranoid. I was under siege. I looked at the drafted email. I did not send it. Instead, I took my phone out. I took a picture of the screen. Then I went to the browser history. I wanted to see what else he had found. There was a search history from a month ago. How to revoke power of attorney. Signs of financial elder abuse. Can a family member access life insurance without a death certificate? And then, one search that made my blood run cold. Tessa Reynolds' gambling debt. I stared at the screen. Gambling debt. I opened a new tab. I searched for public court records. I typed in Tessa's name. It popped up immediately. A civil judgment from 2 years ago. Another one from 6 months ago. Unpaid loans. Credit card defaults. She was not just a bad friend. She was desperate. She was drowning in debt, and she saw my husband's life insurance policy as her life raft. And my parents? They were just greedy. They saw a payday. I closed the laptop. The house was silent. But it was no longer the silence of a victim. I went to the kitchen. I picked up the folder labeled "Claim that I had started." I added the photo of the email draft. I added the notes about the missing check. I was done asking questions. I was done being polite. Evan had started the fight. I was going to finish it. I walked over to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain lock into place. Let them come back tomorrow. Let them bring their soup and their fake smiles. I would be ready, and I would not be the one signing anything. I decided not to tell him everything. There was a specific kind of cruelty in burdening a dying man with the knowledge that the people he had spent his life trying to impress were currently circling his deathbed like vultures waiting for a carcass. I had seen the email draft on his laptop. I knew that he knew. But we entered into a silent agreement, a form of emotional chess where we both pretended that the world outside this room was not rotting. I became a gatekeeper. I filtered the sunlight, the noise, and the truth. When I sat beside him, I smoothed the sheets and talked about the weather or the birds at the feeder, purposefully omitting the fact that my mother had called twice that morning not to ask about his pain levels, but to ask if I had located the deed to the house. It was a Wednesday when Evan made his move. He was having a good hour. The morphine had settled the pain into a dull hum rather than a scream, and he was sitting up, sipping water from a straw. "Shelby," he said. His voice was a rasp, like dry leaves scraping together. "I am here," I said, putting my book down. "The gray box," he said. "The metal one? In the guest closet?" I knew the box. It was a heavy, fireproof lockbox that he had bought years ago. We used to joke that it held the nuclear codes. In reality, it held our marriage license, our birth certificates, and the title to the truck. "Do you want me to open it?" I asked. "No," he said. "I just want it here, closer." He pointed to the floor beside his side of the bed, right next to the nightstand where his water and pills sat. Put it there, he said. So you do not have to search for it later. The word later hung in the air. We both knew what it meant. It meant after. It meant the time when he would no longer be able to tell me where things were. I went to the guest room and dragged the box out. It was heavy. I carried it into the living room and placed it exactly where he asked. Is that better? I asked. He looked at it, then looked at me. His eyes were sunken, but the gaze was intense. Key is on my ring, he whispered. Do not lose it. I will not. I promised. He nodded and closed his eyes. I watched him drift back into sleep, his hand dangling off the mattress, hovering just inches above the steel box. He was planting a flag. He was securing the perimeter. As Evan's condition declined, my world shrank to the four walls of our living room. But I was not entirely alone. Enter Elena. Elena was our hospice nurse. She was a woman in her 50s with thick, capable hands and a voice that sounded like gravel and honey. She did not offer platitudes. She did not tell me that everything happens for a reason. She came in twice a day, checked Evan's vitals, adjusted his catheter, and then sat with me at the kitchen table. She was the anchor I did not know I needed. He is transitioning, Shelby. She told me one afternoon. We were standing in the kitchen while the coffee brewed. She said it matter-of-factly, the way a mechanic talks about a transmission. His breathing is changing. She continued, You hear that pause? The apnea? It is going to get longer. I nodded, gripping my mug. Is he scared? No, she said firmly. He is working. Dying is hard work. The body is shutting down systems one by one. It takes a lot of energy to leave. You just need to be the space he leaves into. She taught me how to administer the liquid morphine without shaking. She taught me how to swab his mouth when he could no longer swallow. She taught me that the rattling sound in his chest was not pain, just fluid, and that I did not need to panic. While Elena provided the medical scaffolding, the Brotherhood of the Transit Authority provided the physical labor. I had spent weeks feeling abandoned by my own family, but I had forgotten that Evan had another family. They did not announce themselves. They just appeared. I woke up one morning to the sound of a lawnmower. I looked out the window and saw Mike, the big guy from the funeral service, pushing a mower across our overgrown front yard. He did not knock. He did not ask for a thank you. He just cut the grass, raked the leaves, and drove away. 2 days later, the porch light that had been flickering for months was fixed. I found a note in the mailbox from a rookie named Davis. Fixed the short in the wire. Did not want you coming home in the dark. Call if you need the gutters done. They brought food. 2. Real food. Not the decorative fruit baskets my parents sent, but trays of lasagna, containers of chili, bags of bagels. They left them in the cooler on the porch so they would not disturb us. This was support without agenda. They did not want to see the will. They did not want to know about the insurance. They just wanted to make sure their brother's wife was not starving or living in the dark. It stood in stark, violent contrast to the people who shared my DNA. On Friday, Elena told me we were in the final window. It could be 2 days. She said softly, It could be tonight. I knew I had to make the call. I walked out to the back porch, closing the sliding glass door behind me. The air was crisp. I dialed my parents' landline. My father answered. Hello? Dad? I said. It is me. Oh, Shelby, he said. His voice had that forced cheerfulness that made my teeth ache. We were just talking about you. How is everything? He is dying. Dad, I said. I did not sugarcoat it. I did not use soft words. Elena says it is a matter of hours, maybe a day. There was a silence on the other end. Oh, he said. That fast? Yes, I said. If you want to say goodbye, you need to come now, today. I heard him sigh. I heard the rustle of papers. Well, honey, that is a bit tight, he said. You know your mother has her appointment tomorrow, and the flights on a Friday are astronomical. We were planning to drive down on Sunday. He will not be here on Sunday. I said. My voice was cold. I felt like I was speaking to a stranger. Are you sure? He asked. Doctors can be wrong. Listen, if we come down, We need to make sure we can maximize the trip. Have you found the paperwork for the mortgage yet? I do not want to drive 4 hours just to turn around and drive back without getting the affairs in order. I closed my eyes. He was negotiating the efficiency of a deathbed visit. Do not bother. I said, What? Do not bother coming. I said, If it is too expensive, just stay there. Shelby, do not be dramatic. He started. We are just being practical. You are going to need help with the filings. I hung up. I stood there for a moment, listening to the dial tone in my head. I did not feel sad. I felt a strange, cold clarity. They were not coming. And honestly, I did not want them there. They would only suck the air out of the room that Evan needed to breathe. I called Tessa next. She picked up on the first ring. Hey, she said. Tessa, I said, it is time. If you want to see him, you need to come today. There was a pause. I could hear the sound of a television in the background. Oh, Shelby, she said. Today? Yes, I said. Today. I cannot today, she said. I have this thing with my car. The mechanic said it is not safe to drive until tomorrow. But I will come tomorrow. First thing, I promise. I will be there by 10 o'clock. Tomorrow. The word was a lie. I knew it. She knew it. Okay, I said. Tomorrow. I hung up. She would not come. She was avoiding the reality of death because it made her uncomfortable, and she was avoiding me because she knew she had stolen from us. She was waiting for the after. She was waiting until he was gone so she could come play the grieving best friend without having to look him in the eye. I went back inside. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic whoosh-click of the oxygen concentrator. My phone rang again an hour later. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I debated not answering, but I needed to know. I needed to know how low they would go. I picked up. Shelby? She asked. Yes, Mom. Did you find the policy? She asked. She did not ask if he was still alive. She did not ask how I was holding up. I am looking for it. I lied. Well, look harder, she snapped. And listen, have you filed anything with the county yet? Or the bank? You need to put a freeze on things before the hospital tries to claim the estate for medical bills. You need to move the money. Shelby? I felt a surge of nausea. I have not filed anything. Mom, I said, I am a little busy holding his hand while he dies. Do not take that tone with me, she said. We are trying to protect you. You are going to thank us later. Just find the policy number and text it to me. I can call the agent for you. I will. I said. I hung up and turned the phone off. I placed it face down on the kitchen counter. It was a brick. It was a portal to a world I no longer lived in. I walked back into the living room. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the floor. I sat down in the chair next to the bed. Evan was awake. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling fan that was spinning slowly overhead. Who was that? He whispered. The words were barely audible. Nobody, I said. I took his hand. It was cold. Just telemarketers. He turned his head slowly to look at me. It took him a long time. His movements were underwater. Shelby, he said. I leaned in close. I am here. He squeezed my hand. It was a weak grip, but there was urgency in it. Promise me, he said. Anything. I said. I stroked his forehead. His skin was clammy. When it happens, he said. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. The box, he said, his eyes darting to the gray metal box on the floor. Yes? Read what is inside, he said. I will. I said, we will go through it together. No, he said. The word was sharp. No. He tried to lift his head, but he could not. Read it alone, he said. Promise me, before you call anyone, before you call your parents, before you call Tessa, read it alone. I froze. Why? I asked. Just promise, he rasped. Protect yourself. I promise. I whispered. I promise. Evan. He relaxed back into the pillows. The tension left his jaw. Good. He breathed. Good. I sat there as the sun went down. The room turned blue, then gray, then black. I did not turn on the lamp. I sat in the dark, listening to his breathing. I felt a strange, creeping dread. It was not just the grief of losing him, it was the realization that there was a whole second story happening around me. I had thought I was the one protecting him. I had thought I was the one shielding him from the betrayal of my family and my best friend. But he had known. He had been watching. And even as he lay there, unable to walk, unable to feed himself, he was making moves on a chessboard I had not even realized existed. He had summoned the box. He had demanded I read it alone. He was setting a trap, or maybe he was building a shelter. I looked at the gray outline of the box on the floor. It sat there like a landmine. I heard the front door open softly. I jumped. It was Elena coming back for the night shift. She tiptoed into the room, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. "How is he?" she whispered. "He is resting." I said. She came over and checked his pulse. She shone a small penlight into his eyes. "He is deep now," she said softly. "He is walking the path." She put a hand on my shoulder. "You should try to sleep. Shelby, I will sit with him." "I cannot sleep," I said. "Then just sit," she said. "Be the witness." I nodded. I sat. I held his hand, and I watched the box. Somewhere in the city. My parents were likely discussing the resale value of my home. Somewhere, Tessa was likely spending the money she had stolen, telling herself she deserved it for being such a good friend. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a foolish, emotional girl who would crumble the moment the support was kicked out from under her. But they did not know about the box. And they did not know that the man in this bed had spent his final burst of energy making sure that when he left. He did not leave me defenseless. The silence in the room deepened. The world outside ceased to exist. It was just me, Evan, and the secrets we were keeping from the people who claimed to love us. I squeezed his hand. "I am listening." I thought, "I am ready." It happened at dawn. The end did not come with the cinematic struggle I had expected. There was no gasping for air, no thrashing against the inevitable. It was simply a cessation. The rhythm of the oxygen machine continued its mechanical whoosh-click, whoosh-click, but the rhythm of the man in the bed faltered. I was holding his hand, my head resting on the mattress near his shoulder, drifting in that gray space between sleep and wakefulness. I felt his fingers relax. It was a subtle shift, a release of tension that traveled up his arm. I lifted my head. The light in the room was blue and thin, filtering through the curtains. Evan's eyes were closed. His chest, which had been rising and falling with labored effort for days, was still. "Evan?" I whispered. There was no answer. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It was a physical weight, pressing against my eardrums. I waited for the next breath. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 10. It never came. I did not scream. I did not cry out. I simply leaned forward and kissed his forehead. It was still warm, but the spark was gone. The energy that made him Evan, the humor, the kindness, the fierce protectiveness, had left the room. I sat there for an hour, just holding his hand as the sun came up. I watched the light travel across the floorboards we had refinished together. I watched the dust motes dance in the air. I memorized the line of his jaw and the gray hairs in his beard. I knew that the moment I picked up the phone, this private, sacred silence would be shattered by the bureaucracy of death. I was right. Elena, the hospice nurse, arrived at 8 o'clock. She confirmed what I already knew. She made the official call. The funeral home came an hour later. They were respectful, moving with hushed efficiency. But watching them wheel him out of our front door was like watching my own heart being carved out of my chest. The house was empty. The hospital bed was empty. The oxygen machine was silent. And then the phone started ringing. My mother called at 10 o'clock. It had been barely 2 hours since the hearse pulled away. "Shelby," she said. Her voice was steady. It was composed. It was the voice of a woman managing a project, not a mother comforting a grieving daughter. "He is gone." I said. I was standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker. I know, she said. I saw the post from his cousin on Facebook. She had found out via social media. She had not called to check on me during the night. She had waited for a status update. Well, she continued, barely pausing for a breath, we need to think about next steps. Have you called the life insurance company yet? You need to get that claim started immediately. Funerals are expensive, Shelby, and you do not have the liquidity to cover it up front. I closed my eyes. Not I am sorry, not I love you, just liquidity. I have not called anyone. Mom, I said, I just watched them take his body away. Right, she said, dismissing my emotion. But practicalities matter. Do you want your father to call the agent? He can handle the paperwork. We just need the policy number. Did you find it? I hung up. I could not listen to it. 10 minutes later, Tessa called. Oh my God, Shelby, she wailed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I just saw the news. I am so sorry. I cannot believe he is gone. She sounded devastated. If I did not know better, if I had not seen the bank records, if I had not heard her whispers on the porch, I would have believed her. She was a masterful performer. Thank you, I said. My voice was flat. I am coming over, she said. I can come over later. I have a client meeting I cannot move, but I can be there by 5. We can go through the paperwork. Do you need help with the claim forms? I know how confusing those can be. The claim forms, again. Everyone wanted to help with the claim. No one wanted to help with the grief. No, I said. I do not need help with the paperwork. I need to plan a funeral. I will help you with that too, she promised. We can pick out flowers. I have it handled. Tessa, I said, I have it handled. I hung up on her too. I did not call my family to help me plan the service. I did not call Tessa. I called Mike. Evan's supervisor picked up on the first ring. He did not ask about insurance. He did not ask about the house. I am on my way. Shelby, was all he said. Mike and 3 other officers, Davis, Miller, and a sergeant named Kowalski, met me at the funeral home that afternoon. They walked in wearing their uniforms, hats tucked under their arms, their faces solemn. They looked like a wall of blue granite. Mr. Henderson, the funeral director, looked at them with respect. We want the full honor guard, Mike said, pointing a thick finger at the brochure. Evan earned it. The department will cover the escort. I sat in the corner of the selection room, feeling small and fragile. What about the casket? Mister? Henderson asked me gently, before I could answer. Miller spoke up. He wanted the oak. Miller said quietly. He told me once, when we were on a stakeout, he said, none of that metal stuff. Put me in wood. I want to go back to the earth. I looked at Miller. I had not known that. Evan had never told me that. Okay, I whispered. The oak. The coworkers did not ask about the cost. When Mr. Henderson brought up the reception catering, Kowalski pulled out his credit card. The guys collected a fund, Kowalski said, handing the card to the director. Put the food, the drinks, and the flowers on this. Whatever Shelby wants. I started to cry then. Real, hot tears, not because of the grief, but because of the kindness. These men, who spent their days dealing with the worst of the city, were showing me the best of humanity. They were protecting me. They were standing in the gap where my father and mother should have been. The day of the funeral was a Tuesday. The sky was a brilliant, cruel blue. It felt wrong for the sun to be shining so brightly when my world had gone dark. I arrived early. Mr. Henderson had reserved the front row for the immediate family. 3 chairs. I stood there, looking at them. I had placed the little reserve signs there myself. It was a test. I knew it was a test. Part of me, the part that was still a little girl who wanted her mommy, hoped they would fail the test of their own greed and actually show up. The chapel began to fill. The air conditioner hummed. The scent of lilies was thick and cloying. Evan's side of the room was packed. The transit authority had turned out in force. There were men in dress blues standing along the back wall because there were no seats left. The neighbors were there. The barista from our coffee shop was there. Elena, the hospice nurse, sat in the third row, looking steady and calm, but the 3 chairs in the front row remained empty. I sat down. I checked my watch. 2 o'clock. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from Tessa. Something came up. I cannot make it. So sorry. I stared at the screen. The text I had seen in my nightmares. The text I had been dreading. Something came up. It was so vague, so dismissive. It was the digital equivalent of a shrug. Then came the notification of a voicemail. My mother. I lifted the phone to my ear, pressing it hard against my head to block out the organ music. Shelby? Honey? Listen, your dad is not feeling too great. His stomach is acting up again. We were on the highway, but we decided to just turn around and head back. We do not want to risk it being something contagious. We will catch up with you later in the week. I lowered the phone. They had turned around. They were on the highway, if they even were on the highway, and they turned around. They were not coming. I looked at the empty chairs. The velvet cushions looked pristine. They were gaps in a row of teeth. They were a public declaration of abandonment. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mike. You want me to sit there? Shelby? He whispered, nodding at the empty seats. Me and the guys can fill that row. I looked up at him. His eyes were kind, filled with a mixture of sadness and anger on my behalf. He saw it. Everyone saw it. No, I said. My voice was cold steel. Leave them empty. He hesitated, then nodded. He understood. He stepped back. The service began. The chaplain spoke about duty. He spoke about service. He spoke about Evan's laugh. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium. I gripped the wood to stop my hands from shaking. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the pity in their eyes. I saw them glancing at the empty front row, then back at me. They were wondering what I had done to deserve this. They were wondering why my own mother was not there to hold my hand. I took a deep breath. Evan used to tell me that love is not a noun. I said. The microphone amplified my voice, sending it bouncing off the back walls. He told me love is a verb. I continued. It is an action. It is not about what you say. It is not about what you post on the internet to get sympathy. I looked directly at the camera that was live streaming the service. I knew Tessa was watching. I knew my mother was watching. Love is showing up, I said. That is it. It is just showing up. When it is hard, when it is inconvenient, when you are tired, when you would rather be anywhere else, you show up. Because that is what you do for the people who matter. The room was deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Evan showed up. I said, and look at all of you. I swept my hand toward the back of the room. Toward the standing room, only the crowd of officers and neighbors. You showed up. You are love. The people who are here, right now, sitting in these seats, you are the definition of family. Because family is not blood. Blood is just biology. Family is presence. I looked down at the 3 empty chairs one last time. I let the silence stretch. I let everyone look at them. I let the shame of their absence fill the room, and anything less than that, I said quietly, is nothing at all. I stepped down. The rest of the service was a blur. I remember the bagpipes playing Amazing Grace. I remember the flag being folded. I remember Mike handing me the tight triangle of fabric, his gloves white and pristine. On behalf of a grateful city, he said, choking up. After the service, people milled about in the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the asphalt. The air was cooling down. I stood by the hearse, accepting hugs. My face hurt from the forced stoicism. Shelby, Sarah whispered, hugging me. I am so sorry about your parents. They are fine, I said. They just could not be here. She squeezed my hand. She knew. Slowly, the crowd thinned. The cars pulled away one by one. The officers gave me one last salute and headed to their cruisers. I was turning to get into my own car when I saw her. She was standing near the edge of the parking lot, leaning against a beat-up motorcycle. She was wearing a leather jacket and dark jeans. Her hair was chopped short, dyed a stark platinum blonde. She was smoking a cigarette, watching me. She looked out of place. She looked like trouble. But then she took off her sunglasses, and I stopped breathing for a second. She had Evan's eyes. She pushed off the motorcycle and walked toward me. Her stride was long and confident. She did not look like someone who offered condolences. She looked like someone who settled scores. She stopped 3 feet away from me. She dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her boot. "You are Shelby," she said. It was not a question. I said, "Do I know you?" "No," she said, "but I knew him." She jerked her head toward the hearse where Evan's casket was waiting. "I am Mariah," she said, "Evan's sister." I stared at her. Evan had mentioned a half-sister once, years ago. He said they had lost touch. He said she was the black sheep, the one who ran away at 16. He had never mentioned they were in contact. "I did not know you were coming." I said, "Nobody did." She said, she looked over my shoulder at the empty parking lot. I saw the front row inside. "Nice speech. You have guts." She reached into her jacket pocket. I tensed, half expecting a weapon, but she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was old, creased and worn, like it had been carried around for a long time. "He wrote to me," she said, "about 6 months ago, tracked me down in intense detail. I thought he wanted money." She handed me the paper. I did not open it. I just held it. "He did not want money," she said. "He wanted a favor." "What favor?" I asked. Mariah looked at me. Her expression softened. Just a fraction, beneath the tough exterior. I saw the same sadness I felt. "He told me to come today," she said. "He told me that if I ever loved him, I would show up at his funeral, not for him, but for you." "For me?" I whispered. She nodded. She took a step closer. Her voice dropped low, so low that the wind almost carried it away. "He said you were going to be surrounded by sharks," she said. "He said the people who were supposed to love you were going to try to bleed you dry." She looked directly into my eyes. The intensity was terrifying. "He warned me," she said. "He said someone would try to take advantage of you, and he asked me to be the backup." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Evan had not just left me a box. He had called in the cavalry. He had reached out to the estranged sister, the black sheep, the one person who knew how to fight dirty, and asked her to stand guard. He knew. I whispered. "Yeah, he knew," Mariah said. She looked at the folded paper in my hand. "You better read that later. But for now, just know this. You are not alone. And if anyone tries to touch you, they have to go through me." She put her sunglasses back on. "I am staying at the motel down the road," she said. "I will be in touch." She turned and walked back to her motorcycle. The engine roared to life, a jagged, angry sound that cut through the quiet of the funeral home parking lot. I watched her drive away. I looked down at the paper in my hand. I looked at the empty space where my parents' car should have been. Evan was gone, but he had not left me unprotected. He had left me a box of truth, and he had left me a sister made of steel. I got into my car. I placed the folded paper on the passenger seat. I drove home. The house would be empty, yes, but for the first time in weeks, I did not feel afraid of the silence. I felt like I was waiting for the war to start. And now, I had an army. The house was different now. It was not just empty, it was sealed. The funeral was over. The guests had gone. The silence that filled the rooms was not the heavy, suffocating silence of a sick room anymore. It was the sharp, echoing silence of a battlefield after the smoke has cleared. I locked the front door. I slid the deadbolt home. I engaged the chain. Then I went to the back door and checked that one too. I checked the windows. I pulled the blinds down tight. I was fortifying the perimeter. I walked into the living room. The gray metal box was still there on the floor, right where Evan had asked me to put it. It looked innocuous. Just a standard fireproof container you could buy at any office supply store. But I knew better. I knew it was a time capsule. I sat down on the floor next to it. I did not turn on the overhead lights. I just turned on the small reading lamp by the armchair. The pool of yellow light illuminated the box and my hands, which were trembling so hard I could barely get the key into the lock. "Read it alone," he had said. "Promise me." I turned the key. The lock clicked with a heavy, mechanical sound. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were no sentimental trinkets. There were no photos of our wedding or dried flowers. It was all business. It was a stack of manila envelopes, neatly labeled in Evan's handwriting, but his handwriting was shaky. The letters formed with the jagged edges of a man fighting tremors. The top envelope was labeled simply, "Shelby. Read this first." I took a deep breath, the air shuddering in my lungs. I slid my thumb under the flap and tore it open. I pulled out a letter. It was 3 pages long. It was handwritten. "My dearest Shelby, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if I know you, you are sitting on the floor, probably wearing that old oversized sweater I love, and you are scared. You are scared because the house is quiet, and because you feel like the world has abandoned you. But you are not abandoned, and you are not defenseless. I need you to listen to me closely. Shelby, I need you to put aside your grief for a moment and listen to your husband. I know about the money." I gasped. The sound was involuntary, a sharp intake of breath that hurt my throat. I know about the missing envelope from Miller. I know about the withdrawal from the ATM at the gas station. I know about the check from the benefits office that never made it to your hand. I saw you checking the accounts late at night. I saw the worry on your face when you thought I was asleep. I heard the phone calls you took in the kitchen, whispering so I would not hear you begging for extensions on the bills. You were trying to protect me. You wanted me to die in peace, without knowing that the people closest to us were picking our pockets. You took that burden on yourself because that is who you are. You are the strongest woman I have ever known, but I could not let you carry it alone, and I could not let them get away with it. I played sleep. Shelby. When Tessa came over and sat in the chair, talking about her bad luck and her car trouble, I was listening. When your mother called and asked about the deed, I was listening. I heard them talking on the porch. I heard them discussing the after, like it was a business merger. They think you are weak. They think grief makes you stupid. They are counting on the fact that you will be too broken to fight back. So I did the fighting for you. In the next envelope, you will find the proof. I did not just listen. I acted. I used the old laptop. I installed a keylogger on the guest network 2 months ago, right after Tessa asked for the Wi-Fi password. I have access logs. I have screenshots. I stayed quiet because I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they were winning so they would get sloppy. And they did. Do not cry for them. Shelby, they made their choice. Now, here is the plan. I put the letter down. My hands were wet with tears, but my heart was pounding with a strange, fierce rhythm. He had known, all those times I had smiled and lied and said everything was fine. He had known. He had been lying there, trapped in a failing body, running a counterintelligence operation against his own in-laws. I picked up the second envelope. It was thick. It was labeled, "Evidence." I opened it. The first thing I saw was a printout of a login log for our bank account. Attempted access, October 12th. IP address, license to T, Reynolds. Status, failed. Incorrect password. Attempted access, October 12th. Status, successful. Password reset, via security question. She had guessed the security question. What is the name of your first pet? Everyone knew I had a dog named Buster. She knew. I flipped the page. There were screenshots. They were text messages. Evan must have synced her phone to the cloud. When she left it charging on the kitchen counter that day, she forgot it. The conversation was between Tessa and Mom. Tessa. She is completely out of it today. The nurse gave him the heavy meds. Shelby looks like a zombie. Mom. Good. Did you bring up the power of attorney again? Tessa. Not yet. I am waiting for the right moment. She is still clinging to the idea that he might rally. Mom. He is not going to rally. We need to be ready. The market is shifting. We need that house listed by May 1st if we want to get the maximum return. I spoke to the broker. He says we can get $50,000 over asking if we stage it right. That means getting him out of there. Tessa. I know. I am working on it. I told her she is not thinking clearly. I am planting the seed that she needs help managing things. Mom. Keep pushing, and make sure you get the login for the life insurance. Your father is worried she's going to do something stupid with the payout, like pay off the mortgage. We need that liquidity for the investment fund. Tessa. Do not worry. I am on it. What is my cut again? Mom. We agreed on 10% of the sale proceeds, assuming you can get her to sign the management agreement. Tessa. Done. She trusts me. She has no one else. I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. What is my cut again? 10%. My best friend, the woman who had stood beside me at the altar. She had sold me out for 10% of my husband's death. And my mother. Your father is worried she's going to do something stupid, like pay off the mortgage. Paying off the mortgage on the home I lived in was stupid. Handing the money to them for their investment fund was smart. I felt a physical blow to my chest. It was not grief. It was nausea. I put the papers down on the carpet. I felt dirty just touching them. But there was more. I picked up the third envelope. It was labeled, The Shield. I opened it. This one contained legal documents. They looked official. They had embossed seals. I read the cover letter from a law firm I did not recognize. Dear Mrs. Carney, per the instructions of your husband, Mr. Evan Carney, we have executed the following changes to your estate plan and financial assets, effective immediately upon his passing. 1. Beneficiary lock. The life insurance policy ending in 449 has been placed into an irrevocable trust. You are the sole beneficiary. The trust explicitly forbids the transfer of funds to any third party for the purpose of investment management, without the unanimous consent of an independent review board. This blocks any attempt by family members to pressure you into signing over the funds. 2. The house. Mr. Carney has executed a homestead declaration and a deed transfer that places the property into the Carney Family Preservation Trust. The terms of the trust state that the property cannot be sold for a period of 12 months following his death. This cooling-off period is legally binding. Even if you wanted to sell it tomorrow, you cannot. This removes the leverage from anyone pressuring you to list the home immediately. 3. Harbor Wren. Financial Partners. Mr. Carney has designated Harbor Wren Financial Partners as the sole executor of the financial transition. All inquiries regarding debts, assets, and insurance payouts must be directed to them. I frowned. Harbor Wren Financial Partners? I had never heard of them. I looked closer at the document. There was a sticky note attached to the bottom in Evan's handwriting. Shelby. Harbor. Wren does not exist. It is a shell. The phone number routes to a burner phone I gave to Mariah. If your parents or Tessa try to call the financial advisor to get information, they are going to get my sister, and she knows exactly what to say. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He had invented a fake financial firm just to mess with them. He had built a labyrinth for them to get lost in. I picked up the final document in the envelope. It was a check. It was a cashier's check. The amount was $18,000. I stared at it. Where had this come from? We were broke. We were overdrawn. I read the note attached to it. I sold the truck. I did it 3 weeks ago when Mike came over to fix the porch. He drove it away. I told him to sell it for cash and hold the money until today. This is not in the bank accounts. Your parents do not know about it. Tessa does not know about it. This is your war chest. Shelby, this is for the bills. This is for you to breathe. I looked at the check. He had loved that truck. It was his pride and joy. And he had sold it, secretly, so that I would have a safety net that they could not touch. I put the papers down. I picked up Evan's letter again to read the end. I am sorry I have to leave you with this mess. Shelby, I wanted to leave you with a life of peace, but since I cannot give you that, I am giving you the truth. Do not let them gaslight you. Do not let them tell you that you are crazy or confused. You are sharp, you are capable, and you are right. And please, Shelby, listen to me. Do not let grief make you hand your life to people who did not show up for it. I love you. I will always be the guy who spilled coffee on your scrubs. Love, Evan. I sat there in the dark for a long time. The tears stopped. It was strange. One moment I was weeping, and the next, the tears just shut off. It was as if a valve had been turned. The sorrow was still there, deep and heavy, but the hysteria was gone. In its place was something cold and hard. It felt like steel. It felt like the barrel of a gun. I looked at the evidence scattered on the floor. The text messages, the login attempts, the betrayal laid out in black and white. They were coming tomorrow. Tessa had promised to be here by 10 o'clock. My parents would likely be right behind her. Now that the inconvenience of the funeral was over and the business of the estate could begin, they were coming to help me. They were coming to guide the poor, confused widow through the paperwork. They were coming to collect their 10%. I stood up. My legs were stiff, but steady. I gathered the papers. I put the text messages in a neat stack. I put the bank logs on top of them. I put the letter from the fake law firm on top of that. I walked to the kitchen. I turned on the lights. The sudden brightness hurt my eyes, but I did not blink. I went to the drawer where I kept the household files. I pulled out a fresh folder. I wrote a name on the tab. The unmasking. I put Evan's evidence inside. Then I went to the fridge. I took out a bottle of water and drank it in one long pull. I needed to be hydrated. I needed to be clear. I looked at the phone on the counter. It was still turned off. I turned it on. It buzzed immediately. Texts from Tessa. Texts from my mother, Tessa. Thinking of you, babe. See you in the morning. Try to get some rest. Mom. Call us when you are up. We need to discuss the broker. I did not reply. I did not block them. I wanted them to come. I walked back into the living room and looked at the empty spot where the hospital bed had been. I looked at the spot on the floor where I had read the letter. Thank you, Evan. I whispered into the silence. I was not going to yell at them. I was not going to scream or throw things. That is what they expected. They expected an emotional breakdown. They expected a grieving woman they could pat on the head and manipulate. I was going to give them something else. I was going to give them a meeting. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. Just for a second. To look out at the street. It was empty. The streetlights hummed. Tomorrow. They would walk up that path with their casseroles and their contracts. They would walk in with their sad faces and their greedy hearts. And I would be sitting at the table waiting for them. I locked the door again. I went to the bedroom and lay down on the side of the bed that was still mine. I put the cashier's check on the nightstand. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I slept. Not the sleep of the exhausted caregiver, but the sleep of a soldier the night before the battle. I was ready. It took exactly 7 days for them to show up. I knew they would come. I had marked it on the calendar in the kitchen, a small red X on the Tuesday following the funeral. It was the respectable amount of time to wait. 7 days was long enough to claim they were giving me space to grieve, but short enough to ensure I had not yet made any permanent decisions about the estate. I was ready. I had spent the week cleaning the house. I scrubbed the floors where the hospital bed had been. I opened the windows to let out the scent of antiseptic and sickness. I put fresh flowers on the table. Not lilies. Never lilies again, but bright yellow sunflowers that Evan had loved. I dressed not in sweatpants or pajamas, but in jeans and a crisp white button-down shirt. I put on shoes. I put on makeup. I looked like a woman who was going to work, not a widow who was falling apart. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell rang. I walked to the front door. I checked the peephole. They were arranged on the porch like actors in a bad commercial for family unity. My mother was in the center, holding a Pyrex dish covered in aluminum foil. My father stood behind her, wearing a golf polo and a somber expression that did not quite reach his eyes, and Tessa was to the left, holding a gift bag with tissue paper sticking out of the top. They looked prepared. They looked rehearsed. I unlocked the deadbolt. The sound was loud in the quiet house. I opened the door. "Shelby!" my mother cried out. She surged forward, attempting to embrace me. But the casserole dish created a barrier between us. I did not step in to close the gap. I stood firm, my hand on the doorknob. "Mom," I said. "Dad, Tessa, we have been calling you for a week," Tessa said, stepping around my mother to hug me. She smelled of expensive perfume and cigarettes. Her hug was tight, frantic. I was so worried. I almost called the police for a welfare check. "Why have you not answered the phone?" I pulled back gently. I did not smile. I was busy. I said, "Busy?" my father asked, stepping into the foyer without waiting to be invited. "Busy with what? You should be resting. You should be letting family take care of you. That is why we are here." He looked around the hallway, his eyes scanning the walls, the floor, the ceiling. He was not looking for dust. He was looking for cracks. He was assessing the asset. "Come in," I said. "We should talk." I led them into the kitchen. I did not offer them coffee. I did not offer them water. I sat at the head of the table. My mother set the casserole down on the counter with a heavy clatter. "It is lasagna," she said. "I know you probably have not been eating." Tessa sat down to my right, placing the gift bag on the table. "Just some self-care stuff," she said softly, reaching for my hand. "Bath bombs, a candle, just things to help you breathe. Sweetie, you look tense." I looked at her hand covering mine. Her manicure was fresh, a bright, cheerful pink. "I am not tense," I said, withdrawing my hand. "I am focused." My father cleared his throat. He pulled out a chair and sat opposite me. He clasped his hands on the table, mimicking a boardroom negotiation. "Shelby," he began, "we need to have a serious conversation. We wanted to give you a few days to decompress after the service," which was lovely, by the way, very moving. "But?" I asked. "But we are concerned," he said. "We are concerned about your stability. You are a young woman. Shelby, you have just been through a trauma, and trauma clouds judgment." Tessa nodded vigorously. "It is true, babe. It is called grief brain. You make decisions you do not mean to make. You push people away, like ignoring our calls all week. That is not you. That is the grief talking." I looked at them. They were weaving a narrative in real time. I was the hysterical, unstable widow. They were the steady, rational saviors. "So," my mother chimed in, leaning against the counter, "we think it is best if you let us step in and help manage the transition. Specifically, the house. Here it comes." "The house?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "It is too much for you to maintain alone. The memories here, they must be haunting, and the market is volatile. Your father spoke to a broker friend of his. If we list it by the 1st of the month, we can capitalize on the spring buyers. And the insurance." My father added, "Have you received the packet yet?" "Not yet." I lied. "Okay, well, when it comes, do not sign anything," he said. "You need to let Jameson handle it. We need to get that capital into a high-yield growth fund immediately. If you leave it in a savings account, inflation will eat it alive. We are just trying to be smart. Shelby, we want to make sure you have a future." I looked at Tessa. "What do you think? Tessa, should I sell?" She looked at me with wide, sincere eyes. "I think you should do whatever gives you peace," she said. "And honestly, I think being here, alone, is dangerous for your mental health. I think your parents are right. Sell it. Get a fresh start. And let them handle the heavy lifting with the money. You do not need that stress right now." I nodded slowly. "It sounds like you have it all figured out." I said, "We just want what is best for you." My mother said, "We are your family. We are the only ones who truly have your back." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. The sound was harsh. I walked over to the counter where I had placed the folder. I had named it The Unmasking. But I had decided that was too dramatic. I had simply labeled it Truth. I picked it up. I walked back to the table and placed it in the center. "That is interesting," I said, "because I have been doing some reading, and I'm confused about a few things." My father frowned. Confused about what? About the definition of family. I said. I opened the folder. I took out the first sheet of paper. It was the bank log showing the ATM withdrawal. I slid it across the table toward Tessa. October 14th. I said. You loaned me $2,800. You were a savior. You told me not to worry about paying it back. Tessa looked at the paper. Her smile faltered. I do not understand, she stammered. The next day, I continued, my voice steady, conversational. Someone used my debit card and PIN to withdraw exactly $2,800 from the gas station ATM 3 blocks away. Tessa went pale. That is weird, she said, laughing nervously. You must have been hacked. You should call the bank. I did not call the bank. I said, I checked the security footage. I did not actually have the footage. But she did not know that. Her eyes went wide. And then, I said, I remembered the cash envelope from Evan's coworkers, $300, gone, and the check from the benefits office, $1,200, cashed via mobile deposit. I pulled out the letter from the benefits office with the torn flap. I slammed it onto the table. Tessa flinched. Shelby, you are scaring me, she said, her voice trembling. You are imagining things. Why would I steal from you? I am your best friend. I pulled out the stack of text messages. I slid them toward my mother. Read the highlighted part. Mom, I said. My mother looked down. She squinted. What is my cut again? I read aloud. 10% of the sale proceeds, assuming you can get her to sign the management agreement. My mother's face turned the color of ash. She looked at Tessa. Tessa looked at the table. The silence in the room was absolute. The refrigerator hummed. A car drove by outside. This is out of context. My mother sputtered. She tried to grab the paper, but I put my hand on it. Out of context? I asked. You were negotiating a commission fee for my best friend to manipulate me into selling my home. You were discussing my husband's death like it was a grand opening sale. My father stood up. His face was red. Where did you get these? He demanded. He pointed a finger at me. You violated privacy laws. This is illegal. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. You are worried about privacy laws? I asked. You were steaming open my mail. You were logging into my bank accounts. I pulled out the IP address log. Tessa Reynolds, I said, looking at her. You guessed my security question. You reset my password. You thought I was too busy wiping vomit off the floor to notice. Tessa burst into tears. It was sudden and theatrical. She buried her face in her hands. I did it for you, she sobbed. I needed the money. I was going to pay it back. I have debts. Shelby, you do not understand. I was drowning. I watched her cry. I felt nothing. No pity. No sadness. You were drowning? I asked. My husband was dying, and you decided to use him as your personal ATM. She looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. I am sorry, she wailed. Please, Shelby, do not call the police. We can work this out. I turned to my parents. And you, I said. You did not need the money. You are not in debt. You are just greedy. We were protecting you, my mother shouted. She was not crying. She was angry. She had been caught, and she was furious. We knew you would blow through that money. You have no financial sense. We wanted to secure your future. By taking control of it? I asked. By putting it in an account I could not touch? My father slammed his hand on the table. Evan put you up to this, he shouted. He was always paranoid. He always hated us. He filled your head with this poison. Do not say his name, I said. My voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried more weight than his shouting. He is dead, my father yelled, and he is still ruining this family. He was a control freak. Shelby, he wanted to isolate you from us. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who was supposed to be my protector. He did not isolate me. I said, you did. I gathered the papers back into a pile. Evan knew. I said, he knew everything. He saw you. He heard you. And he spent his last days, his last hours of energy, making sure you could not win. I picked up the document from the folder, the one with the seal of the Carney Family Preservation Trust. You want me to sell the house? I asked. I cannot. I held up the document. The deed is locked. I said, it is in a trust. It cannot be sold for 1 year. Not by me. Not by you. Not by anyone. My father stared at the paper. His jaw worked. And the insurance? He asked. The money? I smiled. It was a smile that did not reach my eyes. Harbor Wren Financial Partners. I said. My mother blinked. Who? The executor. I said. All assets have been transferred to a blind trust managed by Harbor Wren. If you want to discuss the money, you have to call them. I handed her the business card I had printed out the night before. It had the logo Evan had designed and the number for the burner phone Mariah was holding. You can call their senior advisor. I said, her name is Mariah. I think you will find she is very protective of her clients. My father looked at the card. He looked at me. He realized the game was over. He realized that the simple transit worker husband he had looked down on for 7 years had outsmarted him from the grave. This is ridiculous, he spat. We will contest this. We will get a lawyer. You are not competent to manage this trust. Go ahead, I said. I have the evidence of fraud. I have the text messages. I have the bank logs. If you take me to court, I will put all of this into the public record. I will make sure everyone at your country club knows exactly how you treat your widowed daughter. He froze. Reputation was the only thing he valued more than money. He looked at my mother. Get your purse. Janet, we are leaving. My mother looked at me. Her expression was a mixture of shock and hatred. You are making a mistake. Shelby, she said, you are going to be all alone in this big, empty house. And when you realize you cannot handle it, do not come crawling back to us. Tessa stood up, wiping her eyes. She reached for the gift bag she had brought. Leave it, I said. She stopped. Leave the bag, I said. Consider it a down payment on the $2,800 you stole. She dropped the bag. She looked at me one last time. There was no friendship left in her eyes, only fear. She hurried out the door after my parents. My father paused at the threshold. He turned back. You need us. Shelby, he said. His voice was menacing. You have no one. Evan is dead. Your friends are gone. You are going to rot in here by yourself. I looked at him. I looked at the 3 people who had left 3 empty chairs at the funeral. I stood tall. I did not shake. I needed you already. I said, the words hung in the air. I needed you when he was diagnosed. I said, I needed you when I was sleeping on the floor. I needed you when I was standing at his grave. I looked him dead in the eye. You did not come. My father opened his mouth to speak, but he had nothing left to say. The truth was a wall he could not climb. He turned and walked out. I walked to the door. I watched them get into their cars. Tessa got into her sedan. My parents into their luxury SUV. They did not look at each other. They drove away in opposite directions. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain. The house was silent again. But it was not the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of victory. I walked back to the kitchen. I looked at the casserole on the counter. I picked it up and threw it in the trash, foil and all. I looked at the gift bag. I opened it. Inside was a cheap candle and a bath bomb that smelled like artificial lavender. I threw that in the trash, too. I sat down at the table. I was alone. But then, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was a text from a number I did not have saved, but I recognized the area code. Mariah. Just got a call from a very angry man asking about Harbor Wren assets. I told him the review board is currently on a sabbatical in hell. Hope that was okay. I laughed. A real laugh. Perfect. I typed back. I was not alone. I had Mariah. I had Mike and the guys. I had the memory of a man who loved me enough to build a fortress around me before he left. I looked at the sunflowers on the table. They were bright and defiant. I am okay, I said to the empty room, and for the first time since the diagnosis. I believed it. The door did not close easily. I stood there in the threshold, my hand on the brass knob, watching the three people who had defined the landscape of my life for 34 years. They were standing on the porch steps, caught in that terrible, suspended moment between denial and defeat. In my previous account, I told you they left, and they did. But before they walked to their cars, before the engine started and the tires crunched on the gravel, there was one final, desperate attempt to claw back the control they had lost. They refused to accept the ending I had written for them. My father was the first to stop. He turned around on the bottom step. His face flushed a mottled red. He looked at the closed folder on the kitchen table through the open door, then back at me. He could not believe that his authority, which had been absolute for my entire life, had evaporated in the span of 20 minutes. "You cannot do this. Shelby," he said. His voice was not shouting anymore. It was low, menacing, the voice he used when I was a teenager and had missed curfew. "You are making a scene. You are acting out of hysteria. I am not hysterical." I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of a person who has already survived the worst thing that could happen to them. Losing Evan was the worst thing. Losing you is just paperwork. I looked at all three of them. Any future communication goes through my attorney. I said, "Leave," my mother gasped. She clutched her purse to her chest. "Attorney?" she asked. "You do not have an attorney. Shelby, you have a fake business card and a delusion. You are going to ruin yourself." I leaned against the doorframe. I crossed my arms. "That is where you are wrong," I said. I looked at Tessa. She was wiping her eyes. Her mascara smeared in dark streaks down her cheeks. She looked like a tragic heroine in a play that had been canceled mid-performance. I did not just print that evidence for my own scrapbook. I said. Tessa froze. Her hands stopped dabbing at her eyes. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "I mean that before you arrived this morning." I scanned every single page. I said, the text messages, the bank logs, the IP address history, and I sent digital copies to a legal contact Evan set up for me. I paused to let that sink in. And, I added, looking directly at my father, I flagged the unauthorized access on the bank account for a formal fraud review. The bank is already investigating the ATM withdrawal and the mobile deposit of the federal check. They have the timestamps. Tessa made a sound like a wounded animal. She took a step toward me, her hands out. "Shelby, no," she shrieked. "You have to stop it. You have to call them and cancel it." "Why?" I asked. "If it was just a loan, like you said, you have nothing to worry about." It was borrowing," she stammered. "I was going to put it back. I swear. But if they investigate, it will look bad. It will ruin my credit score. I have a job application pending." I looked at her. "You admitted to borrowing the transfer." I said. "But what about the check from the benefits office? You said you never saw it." Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it. She was trapped. If she admitted to taking the check, she admitted to a federal crime. If she denied it, she contradicted the bank evidence. She was locked in a cage of her own lies. My father stepped in then. He saw the legal threat looming like a storm cloud. He switched tactics instantly. The intimidation vanished, replaced by a smooth, oily negotiation tone. "Shelby, listen," he said, holding up his hands. "Let us take a breath. We are all emotional. We all loved Evan." I flinched at his name in my father's mouth, but I did not look away. "We do not need lawyers," he said. "We do not need banks involved. We are family. Look, your mother and I, we are willing to pay for counseling, for all of us, family therapy. We can work through this anger you are feeling." My mother nodded eagerly, seizing the lifeline. "Yes," she said, "a fresh start. We can wipe the slate clean. We will forget about the house sale for now. We just want to be in your life. Shelby, we do not want you to be isolated." It was tempting. I will admit that for a fraction of a second. The old Shelby, the one who craved their approval, wanted to say yes. It is hard to sever the root, even when the tree is poisonous. They were offering me a truce. They were offering to pretend none of this happened. But then I looked at the spot on the floor where Evan's hospital bed had been. I remembered his hand in mine. I remembered him whispering, "Do not let them gaslight you. They were only offering a truce because they had lost access to the vault. They were only offering counseling because they were afraid of prosecution." I looked at my father. "You want a fresh start?" I asked. "Yes," he said, relieved. "Exactly. You had a fresh start 7 years ago when I brought Evan home." I said, "You had a fresh start when he got sick. You had a fresh start at the funeral." I pointed to the empty space in the driveway. "You left 3 chairs empty," I said. "You made your choice." I stepped back and began to close the door. "Please, Shelby?" my mother cried out. She stepped forward, as if she expected me to collapse. She expected me to break down, to fall into her arms, to beg for their forgiveness for being so difficult. She waited for the daughter she had trained to be compliant. That daughter did not exist anymore. She had died in the front row of a funeral chapel. I looked her in the eye. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. I closed the door. I did not slam it. I simply clicked it shut. I turned the deadbolt. I slid the chain. I watched through the peephole as they stood there for another minute. My mother looked at the closed door with genuine shock. She turned to my father, gesturing wildly. Tessa was sobbing into her phone, likely calling someone to spin a new web of lies. Finally, they turned. They walked to their cars. They drove away. I slumped against the door. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor of the foyer. I let out a breath that I felt like I'd been holding for 6 months. It was over. The silence that filled the house was massive. It was deep. But for the first time, it was clean. The twist of this story is not that I destroyed them. I did not sue them into poverty. I did not go to the police to press charges for the check. Though I kept the file ready just in case they ever tried to contact me again, I did not post their text messages on social media to humiliate them. Revenge, I realized as I sat on that floor, is not about destruction. Destruction keeps you tied to the people you hate. It keeps you in their orbit. Revenge is freedom. Revenge is taking the life they wanted to control and living it so fully that they become irrelevant. I stood up. I walked into the kitchen. I picked up the cashier's check for $18,000. I did not use it to buy a new car. I did not use it to go on a vacation. I used it to buy time. I paid the mortgage for the next year in advance. I paid off the remaining medical bills that the insurance did not cover. I secured the home. I stabilized my life so that no amount of pressure, no market fluctuation, no unexpected emergency could force me to sell the sanctuary Evan and I had built. The weeks that followed were quiet. They were hard. Grief comes in waves, as anyone who has lost someone knows. There were days when I could not get out of bed because the empty side was too vast. There were days when I reached for my phone to text Evan a joke, and then remembered, but I was safe. I returned to work gradually. I started with 2 shifts a week at the clinic. The routine helped, drawing blood, labeling vials, chatting with patients. It reminded me that life continued. One afternoon, about a month after the confrontation, I heard a motorcycle in the driveway. I looked out the window. It was Mariah. She was wearing her leather jacket, carrying a toolbox. She knocked on the door. "Hey," she said when I opened it. "Evan told me the back deck needed sanding. Said you would never get around to it." I smiled. He was right. She came in. She did not hug me. She did not ask how I was feeling. She just made coffee, strong and black, and we went out to the deck. We spent the afternoon sanding the wood. We did not talk much. We did not have to. She was not Tessa. She did not need to fill the silence with performance. She was solid. She was family. She became a fixture in my life, not a daily one, but a consistent one. She would stop by to fix a leaky faucet. We would watch old westerns on Friday nights, the ones Evan used to love. We laughed about his stubbornness. We cried a little about his absence. She was the sister I had never had, the one who showed up without an agenda. 3 months later, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was familiar. It was Tessa's handwriting. I stood by the mailbox, debating whether to open it. I could burn it. I could tear it up. But curiosity is a human flaw. I opened it. It was a long letter. It was written on lined notebook paper. Shelby, I am not writing this to ask for anything. I know I lost that right. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry. Not the fake sorry I gave you in the kitchen. Real sorry. You were right. I was jealous. I was drowning in debt and I looked at your life and I wanted a piece of it. I thought you were weak. I see now that you were the strong one all along. I am getting help. I am working 2 jobs to pay off my cards. I miss you every day. But I know I cannot fix this. Take care of yourself. Tessa. I read the letter twice. I did not write back. I folded it and put it in the recycling bin. Forgiveness is a tricky thing. People tell you that you have to forgive to move on. I do not think that is true. I think you just have to understand. I understood Tessa. I understood her desperation and her flaw, but understanding her did not mean I had to let her back in. Consequences are the lesson. If I saved her from the consequence of her betrayal, I would rob her of the chance to actually change, and I would rob myself of my peace. 6 months after Evan died, I used the last of the truck money to fund a project. It was small. I donated 2 benches to the city park near the transit station where he had worked. They were placed under a large oak tree. The plaque read, "In memory of Evan Carney, who always showed up." I went there one evening in late autumn. The leaves were turning gold and red. The air was crisp. I sat on the bench. I watched the people walking by. I saw a young couple walking hand in hand. The girl tripped, and the boy caught her, laughing. They looked so much like us. 7 years ago, I closed my eyes. I could feel Evan there, not as a ghost, but as a warmth. I had lost my husband. I had lost my parents. I had lost my best friend. By all accounts, I should have been the loneliest woman in the world. But I sat there on that bench, wrapped in a coat Mariah had given me, watching the city my husband had loved, and I felt something else. I felt free. I walked home as the sun set. I walked up the driveway to the house that was mine. The light was on in the kitchen. I had left it on a timer, a trick Mike had taught me for security. I walked up the steps to the porch. I sat down in the rocking chair. I looked at the street. It was empty. No parents' car, no Tessa's car. Real family is who shows up. That is what I had said at the funeral. And as I sat there, breathing in the cool night air, I realized the corollary to that truth. Real family is also knowing who never will, and being okay with closing the door on them. I was Shelby Carney. I was a widow. I was a survivor. And I was finally, truly, home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your city or country. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and resilience, please subscribe to the channel Nina Revenge Stories, like this video, and tap the notification bell to help this story reach even more listeners. Your support means the world to me.